right, good evening. Welcome to the school committee meeting for Reading Public Schools, February 17th, 2022. We have a very packed agenda, and we appreciate having everybody here. We're looking forward to hearing from many of you as we go through the evening. We will be starting with our Vietnam Veterans Memorial presentation from Mr. Bowmiller here, who's going to present to us. We'll then be moving on to an interesting topic and part of our bit of a change for us this year, trying to bring the schools into the school committee. So we have the Coolidge 6th grade math challenge coming at us today, and we're looking forward to that. We then move to the review of policy EBCFA, which is the face coverings policy. We will then have public comment, consent agenda, reports, and then move to the rest of new business, including the ARPA Advisory Committee appointment, the FY22 quarterly budget update and vote, the surplus material disposal vote, superintendent mid-year formative introduction and goals review, and the superintendent and assistant superintendent for teaching and learning entry plan updates. Some very important topics on the agenda today. I want to make a quick point of clarification because I've heard a lot of questions over the last couple of days, so people are on the same page about how we're going to approach the third topic in particular. There is a red bucket back there. If you are wanting to speak during that topic, please write your name on one of the white pieces of paper that is back there. As we get to that topic, we'll grab that red bucket and use it as part of the process. That is not public comment. We are not stopping public comment, as some people have said. We are trying to control the fact that we have a very large agenda. And we have a lot of things that we need to get done tonight, with some very important topics as part of that as well. So we've heard, as you can see in the packet, about 113 emails in the last week on this topic. It's a very important topic. We appreciate the feedback we've received already. And anybody who wants to speak tonight, we'll have about 20 minutes as a random draw out of that bucket for people who want to speak tonight on that topic, okay? So I just want to give you that now in case you have not signed one of those papers and want to sign it before we get to there, so you can, work your way back there as the time comes, okay? So with that said, we will commence with the regular meeting, and I have a motion to take things out of order first. So, Sean?
Yep, I move to take out of order item D1, Vietnam Veterans Memorial Presentation and Vote.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Robinson. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? And it passes 6-0. Mr. Bowmiller, welcome. Thank you for coming. We're looking forward to hearing about the memorial.
All right, good evening. It's nice to be back. I think we last met virtually in May, but it's good to be here, and thank you again for slipping me in early. I'm going to include a few of the slides that I used at the initial presentation because I know there were some new people on the board. So again, this is something that came up. Brigadier General Jack Hammond, who was a Reading Memorial High School graduate in 1979, approached me with the idea of having a memorial to honor everyone who served in the Vietnam War. So many of the people that, as he went up through the ranks, he was trained by Vietnam veterans, and he wants to recognize and honor them, unfortunately, before they do pass, because we have lost a lot of them. So I've been working with General Hammond, also been working with Mr. Bill Brown, who is a United States Air Force veteran, and he is on the Reading Memorial Trust Fund Committee. Bill Hughes is a Reading resident and a U.S. Marine. His dad is also a U.S. Marine who served during the Vietnam War. So we have 4 of the services covered. I'm a Navy veteran, so we have 4 of the services covered. I'd like to thank Reading Memorial High School Principal Kevin Tracy. He helped us verify some of the information on the soldiers that served in the war and attended Reading Memorial High School. Tom?
You have the clicker, Tom.
Me, Tom, not you,
Yeah,
Tom, huh?
You, Tom, not me, Tom.
Side.
Or Andy.
Side button to turn it on.
We'll figure this out.
You got it.
There we go.
And this is just a picture I love. Back in 2017, I don't remember the high school English teacher, but we did an American Life project, and the students did such a great job. We had a bunch of veterans come down. The students interviewed them, and they were all put onto the website so the veterans could tell their stories. Unfortunately, we've lost a handful of the veterans that were sitting there, but it was a great event and great memories and great job by the students. Okay. Again, we're honoring the service, the valor, and the sacrifice of all Vietnam veterans. My office, the Veteran Services Office, we are a commemorative partner for the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. So we have certificates, we have pins that we give out, and that's something that we'll do during the ceremony ultimately when the memorial is dedicated. So again, what do we want to do? It's a memorial to honor all those from Reading who served during the Vietnam War. It's not just dedicated to people that were boots on the ground in Vietnam. There were an awful lot of people that served, that raised their right hand, but they were sent to Germany. They stayed stateside. But again, they served during the war, so we're recognizing everyone, not just those who were boots on the ground in Vietnam. Again, why now? We've lost so many since they've returned, and we're losing them every day. So before it's too late, we want to recognize them, honor them, and let their families honor them. How? It's funding, again, from the Reading Veterans Memorial Trust Fund. That's the fund that we use at Memorial Day to fund the flowers that we put on about 2,300 graves in the Reading's 4 cemeteries. There are funds there, again, to recognize veterans. So we're going to use funds from that trust fund to pay for the memorial, which is roughly, again, depending on the final design, between $8,000 and $10,000. We may end up asking for some donations, but again, it's not going to cost the schools anything, and we'll maintain it, and happy to do that. We'll probably take about 4 months from final approval of the design to when it's ready to be installed. Originally, we were looking at Memorial Day. Don't know if that'll happen, so it could be in the fall. But we've waited this long, so we want to make it right and be able to plan a good celebration. All right, so this is what we came up with. I don't know if you can see it all. But on the right-hand side, we had 7 people who attended Reading Memorial High School that were killed in action in Vietnam. 6 of the 7 graduated, and we listed their class when they were at the high school. There's 1 person below, and what we listed was attended, and that was Robert Holt. He attended in 1959, and he transferred up to a private school in Andover. But we definitely want to list him. He is the nephew of Nelson Burbank, which I think everybody knows. So above that is, if you can't see it, it's called the Battlefield Cross. It's what they use to dedicate to somebody who's fallen in battle. And we think it's a little bit small up there, so after we saw the design, we feel that we should put it down underneath the map of Vietnam. And what it is, it's the boots, it's the rifle, and it's the helmet. So I think it'll look better down there. And on the right-hand side, again, it's a memorial to all veterans who served, men and women. The overall diameter, it's not overwhelming. It'll be approximately, the centerpiece is about 4 feet high, and it'll sit on a base that's approximately 12 inches high. So the top of it will be a little less than 5 feet. The 2 side wings are 26 inches wide and 28 inches high. So the overall base is 6 feet wide, and again, 12 feet high. So it's not a very imposing monument, but I think it'll fit in right nice, and I have another slide that shows the location. And along with the memorial, it's always nice to have a place for people to reflect. So we thought it'd be nice to put a bench, kind of kitty corner to the memorial. I know at the 9/11 memorial, there were 4 benches out there. So the picture on the right is, on the left is just what we liked, and what we'd like to design and put in is to say, welcome home, thank you for your service. The Vietnam veterans were not welcomed home initially, so we can't stop welcoming them enough. And then on the bottom are the 5 service symbols. Unfortunately, they're not in the correct order here. So and Bill Brown would correct me if we ever put them up wrong. But it's Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. We chose, there is a 6th right now, it's the Space Force, but we're not sure if it's a real thing yet. And it didn't exist back during the war, so we're not going to include that right now. Let's see. Okay, the granite, we like the granite that was done down at the DC Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial. Unfortunately, that's from Bangalore, India, and with the supply chain, it's very expensive, and it could take a couple of years to get it. So we're not going with that. This is another one that looks very similar. It's called American Black Granite, and it's quarried down in Pennsylvania. Excuse me. And it is much more available and is much more reasonably priced. So that's what we chose to go with. And I think when I was here in May, I mentioned doing the picture on the left, just to the left of that is the 9/11 Memorial. And we proposed doing it on that same side, closer to the building. And the right-hand picture is a GIS picture. You can see the 9/11 Memorial to the right, and the diameter of the circle with the 4 benches is approximately 13 feet. So the overall size of the memorial we're proposing will not exceed that. We don't want to overshadow 9/11. So I anticipate it. Again, once we get this design approved, we'll work on the landscaping, but I anticipate it being approximately 10 feet wide. And again, not be overimposing. So that's what we came up with, and I welcome your comments and your questions.
Great. Chuck?
Thank you, Mr. Bowmiller. I think as I said to you and General Hammond back in May, this is near and dear. I'm a son of a Vietnam veteran, so this is so long overdue. And just thank you and thank you to Mr. Brown and everybody else that was involved in this to get it done. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll echo it, Kevin. I mean, thank you very much. Mr. Brown, thank you as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. You can sort of visualize it in that picture, but I don't think that picture really gives it justice of what it's going to look like in the grand scheme. And I agree with you 100% about moving the Soldier's Cross down to that space.
Okay,
It'll be more
great.
prominent. It'll look much better there than the tiny little one at the top. So I was actually going to ask that question as well. You're not bashful. So in May when we met, we asked about the GoFundMe and whether we could distribute it. I'm going to ask again if we can get the GoFundMe sent to Dr. Milczewski and I, so we can make sure it gets into the weekly packet that goes out, either ours or the schools itself, because if it goes out to the schools, then everybody supports Reading Memorial High School that comes here. So I think that'll get even more broadcasting, and for that matter, our town managers are both here. If we can also get it up on the town webpage as well, I'd love to see more people contribute and drive into that as well. So 8,000 to 10,000 is not chump change, it's not a ton, but we can certainly, as a town, help support this even more than maybe we have already.
The year that the trust fund was set up, the cost of the flowers was $3,000, and the town cut them from the budget because of budget cuts. The veterans are not very happy.
So the town can support in other ways. So thank you.
Okay, and we'll also be soliciting, again, to reduce the cost, if there are people, landscapers in town
Yeah.
that may want to help with that overall effort. So as we get closer, we'll be soliciting and reaching out for that.
I would agree. Great, thank you. Sean, do we have a motion?
We do. I move to approve the design and placement of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial at RMHS as presented.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Carla. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, we are now going to take the Coolidge Math Challenge out of order. Or we'll ask for that, and assuming we'll pass it, so.
I move to take out of order item E1, Coolidge Math Challenge.
Seconded by Chuck. And any discussion? All in favor? All in favor? All opposed? It passes 6-0.
I'm terrified.
All right, Heather?
Why is your...
Good evening. Thank you so much for letting us be here. My name is Heather Leonard, and I'm the STEM Curriculum Coordinator. And I'm just simply here as an introductory person, and actually this session is going to be run by these three fantastic mathematicians. I just want to take this moment to acknowledge the fact that we've been, as you're aware, as a school committee, in the process of adopting a math curriculum. And this work has been done through this pandemic, hybrid teaching, in-person teaching, and it's really built on collaboration and communication. And so I just wanted to take a moment and shout out and celebrate our incredible educators who did this process of a pilot and this year one implementation in this unique year of learning, and our incredibly hardworking students who are really digging in and doing some really amazing thinking and conversations in mathematics. And it's not easy to do in a normal year, and with things being different than what we would expect, it's been a really wonderful and beautiful thing to hear the types of mathematical conversations happening in our district. So just a shout out to those educators, and if I can just highlight these mathematicians, their 6th grade math teacher, Ms. Conroy from Coolidge, who came here as well, just to shout her out for the work that she's done and the community of mathematicians that she's created in her class. So with that, I wanted to share that Dr. Milichewski and I had been talking maybe a month or two ago about the idea of sharing what does this math look like and sound like. Like, I've told you what the program is built on and why, and we were trying to think of a great way to do it. And I had heard that we had this fantastic group of students who were doing some really incredible math learning and thought they would be better than anybody else to really share what is their math experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to this group who are excited and ready to share their math experiences with you.
So you have a slide for introducing yourselves, right? Yeah. No, just one turn. Yeah.
My name is Kat Honer.
My name is Peter Mistakawi. Please, this is the one.
And my name is Jason Encarnacio.
When we walk into the classroom, we write down our homework and start on the warm-up. The warm-up is what the title implies. It's a refresher of the work we're doing in class to get our brains warmed up and ready to work hard. Sometimes, when a student has an interesting real-world association with what we're learning in math, they're encouraged to turn it into a problem that the other students can do for the warm-up. Recently, I created a problem like this for percentages. In it, I used the percentages of a Kindle book I was reading and divided the total page number by the different percentages to get how many pages were equal to certain percentages of the book. Then, my amazing math teacher and I turned it into an enjoyable warm-up for my fellow classmates to attempt. Most days after the warm-up, we will review the previous night's homework and correct answers while respectfully comparing strategies to that of the other students. When it's time to start the day's lesson, the teacher will introduce a problem. She may give us something to start off with, or a stepping stone, as she likes to call it. She then normally gives us 2 or 3 minutes to do our best work. Then, we get called together and some students will demonstrate their strategies. And, when a student has an interesting idea, they might get thrown a rubber duck. If students are finished with their work early, they're encouraged to attempt a more challenging reach problem called the Are You Ready for More to keep them engaged while the rest of the class is working. If you're finished with your work early, you will have access to an Are You Ready for More as well. The picture on the screen shows Jason, Peter, and I working together on a problem from our current unit, dividing fractions. Now let's hand it over to Peter to give us some facts on our amazing new curriculum.
Illustrative math is welcoming to various different strategies, and it approaches math in many different ways for students to understand, because students have different perspectives and different ways their brains work. Illustrative math was created in 2011 by Dr. Bill McCollum. Also, illustrative math has a comprehensive score of 69 out of 70, and the second highest Ed Report's curriculum is 61 out of 70, which failed to attain and meet expectations rating for usability. This curriculum is actually a problem-based curriculum. This means that students spend most of their time in class working on carefully crafted problems, and teachers help students understand the problems and ask more questions to push their thinking. Each lesson includes a lesson summary that describes the key mathematical work of each lesson and provides worked examples when needed. Also, all lessons include built-in supports for English learners and students with disabilities. Jason, it is your turn to show these fine people the problem they're doing this evening.
Hello, everyone. As you can see, this is the problem we'll be attempting today. I'm going to be giving you some time to try it on your own. After that, we'll have a few of you explain your work and how you completed the problem. When you're doing the problem, don't be afraid to think outside the box. As Ms. Connery always says, there's always more than one way to solve or approach a problem. Have fun.
Oh, boy.
It's a pencil and a graph paper. The problem says to decompose the polygon so that its area can be calculated. All measurements will be in centimeters for you guys. And you also, to calculate its area, you might want to organize your work so that it can be followed by all the others.
So the students have decided you have about 3 minutes to try to work on it, but they're also here, so they're welcome. They're going to come around and check in with you if you have any questions or support. So they are ready to support you to continue your math learning. So they'll be around you about 3 minutes to try this math thinking.
Oh, boy. Here we go. If I look particularly terrified, please come on over and help me. Okay. Can I talk about my approach? I haven't been in sixth grade in a long time. So, I think the harder way would probably be to calculate the the square and then subtract. So I was thinking I would like break it into triangles and a rectangle. Okay, and then I have to remember how to calculate the area of a triangle. So that's my next. So I'm going to break it into shapes and I'll call you if I need more help at that point. Thank you, sir.
Exceedingly nervous right now. Jason, what do you think?
I don't know what to do now. I'm like, can you just tell me how to do it?
How'd I do? Oh, nice. I have to label it. I have to label things. I have to picture pictures.
Remember how to do this, Martha? Barely.
You're all doing an awesome job.
Coolidge. They like to challenge us.
We've done it before.
We've had a few times having fun at Coolidge so far, so.
You guys have to remind me. If they're right.
I didn't see, we got the same answer. We did it the same way.
But he's not cheating. Same answer.
Thank you. I told you I was going to need help.
Their classroom management skills are outstanding, engagement and quiet participants.
Do they have a timer on us, Heather?
I don't know where I was going. What did you come up with?
I guess I technically should write it on the actual problem as opposed to something
What's our
else.
countdown
You ready
clock
for
here?
more?
God, I'm messing myself up now. Okay. So anyway. Are we allowed to use calculators?
Would anyone want to show or explain the way that they figured out this problem?
That would imply I figured it out.
I'm still going.
How would you like us to do that?
Take turns.
My money's on.
My brain
Fidel?
is fuming a little bit right now, so just bear with me. So what I did essentially is I broke up the heart into two triangles at the bottom, right, and that leaves a rectangle in between, right, and then the two curves, I broke each one into a triangle and a rectangle in between, so one triangle, one each side, and then a rectangle in between. If I did my math right, the quantity is 52, but not too confident about the math.
Anybody else want to take a shot? Mr. Haley, you want to take a shot?
Did I get it right? I did? What do you mean, hopefully? I don't know if I got it right.
He's like, I'm not going to take a shot unless it's
Since I
right.
got it right, Tom.
If you get it wrong, you're not on the ARPA committee.
Okay, perfect. But surprisingly, I think I got it right. So same thing as Fidel, except, so if you take the bottom and you cut each one into sections, instead, when you draw the line at between the 6 and the 3, you would get 18 and double it is 36. So the bottom two halves are 18 each, is how I did that. And then same thing, you have 2, 4, 6 at the top, 6 times 3 on that middle section, so that's 18. Then you get to the top, which is the hardest part of the whole thing. And then that's 6 times 2 is 12, but then you have the halves on each tips of the heart thing up there, so you minus those. So you get 18, 18, and 8. And then obviously, you don't have to solve the whole thing, it's only half, and then you double it. So 72, 16 is 88. Did I get it?
I believe you did.
All right.
88. That's the number I got too.
I think I added something else.
Thank you all for working on this problem with us.
Thank you for bringing it.
Stay there for a minute while we think.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Have a nice night.
So I believe if there's any questions for the mathematicians, I'm sure they'd be willing to answer them from the committee.
Anybody have any?
No, wait, I'll make a quick comment. You guys did a great job presenting. That was really awesome. Adults don't do as great a job as you guys just did tonight, many adults, I should say. So I appreciate that, I want to recognize that, but also thank you for helping me brush up on my 6th grade math skills. It was a good way to get our meeting going, get our brains moving, so I appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to say, Tom?
Oh, do you want to go first?
Nope, go ahead.
So, Kat, Jason, Peter, you rock. You are awesome. I have a couple of thoughts. First, I don't know if you know, there's a teacher shortage nationwide. I think many districts would hire you in a second, Reading Public Schools included, so you rock. That was awesome. You know that our job a lot of times is to give teachers feedback. There were 3 things that stuck out to me about your presentation that I love. First thing, I loved your energy and how you reinforced people positively, right? When people came up, you gave them fist pumps, you gave them high fives, you came around, you coached people up positively. That's a good way to build a positive classroom community, so I really appreciate that. Second thing I really enjoy is you made it an okay place to make a mistake. Our new town manager made a mistake on purpose to kind of set the tone for us, right? That it's okay. I'm teasing you. To make a mistake. But you build a culture where we make mistakes, right? And that's okay, right? We've all made mistakes, and when you make it okay to make a mistake and we learn from it, that's how people learn and grow in classrooms, right? So I think that you did a good job tonight making it okay for us. All of us didn't have it perfectly figured out. We were struggling, and that's okay. So I appreciate you doing that. And then also, I really appreciate the multiple ways to solve the problems. You didn't tell us how to do it. You stepped back and gave each of us the space to work through it. And I think that's sort of how a lot of people learn really well and how a lot of kids learn. So I appreciate how you set that up. That was masterful lesson. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Conroy, too, for helping to build that type of community and culture in the class. And I think for all of us who have been at Coolidge, this is not sort of unique to just one classroom. There's a lot of awesome instruction at Coolidge that pushes students in this way. So, Kat, Jason, Peter, thank you for representing the best of our district tonight. And I thought you did a really incredible job. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
We can't beat that. He just summed it up perfectly. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for putting yourselves out there. It's not easy to stand in front of a crowd like this and present like you did. So you did a phenomenal job, and we're ready for the next one, right?
Thank you.
Great. Moms, dads, a lot to be proud of out there, too. Okay, so now we will be moving on to policy EBCFA, face coverings update. And I need to get the bucket, so I will go get the bucket real quick.
Thank you.
It's like the prices, right? Come on down. What's that?
Sarah and Sean. Sarah and Sean.
Me and Sean. Oh, please do, yeah. Will you text it to us and then? That's a good idea.
I think you and I are up in March.
John, will you do our motion for out of order, please?
I will. I move to take out of order item D2, policy EBCFA, face coverings update, discussion, and vote.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Chuck. Any discussion? All in favor? And it passes 6-0. Okay, so again, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to go through this in a relatively structured fashion, again, because we have a lot left on the agenda, and we welcome you to stay for that too, because there's a lot of exciting stuff later in the agenda too. Dr. Milichewski and the team are going to start with some background, some introduction, and some of their findings and suggestions. We will then have each of the committee members provide 3 to 5 minutes or less, if necessary, of their views and thoughts. And after that, we'll allow for about a 20-minute period, give or take. We're going to keep it relatively tightly controlled, of any community feedback that needs to be said in addition. As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we have 113 emails in the packet, of which probably 110 are related to this topic. We have read them. I personally respond to every one of them. I know the responses are very brief in general. It's because there's so many of them, so hopefully people give a little bit of grace in that process. And throughout this evening, we will give grace, and we hope that you will give grace as well as we work through the process here as we go through this. So thank you for coming again, and Dr. Milichewski, would you please start us off?
Great, thank you. I think our mathematicians had the little
clicker.
I don't know if it's back. Perfect.
Mary.
Hope
Thanks,
they
Mary.
didn't go home with it.
Darn.
It's kind of boxed in here. Thank you.
You can't get out.
I can't get out. Thanks, Mary. Oh, well, good evening, Reading community. It's nice to see many of you here, and hello to the folks at home. I'd like to start this conversation by sharing that at the beginning of the year, as we knew we were entering into another year of the pandemic, we outlined the goals for our school year to be to provide all of our students with a safe, uninterrupted, in-person learning experience for our students. And I think all of us are really proud, and I think our community is proud that we've been able to do that thus far. And I'd like to take a minute just to thank the entire community for their support in helping us to utilize all the mitigation strategies at our disposal to, again, keep our students in school and learning safely. So thank you to our entire Reading community. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to all of our staff, who I know have been living on this in the front lines with our students and helping us to keep our students safe and in school, with also a particular thanks to our nurses. I think everyone here knows that our nurses have gone above and beyond during the pandemic to support our students, to support our families, and have taken on sort of a tremendous load on their plates and have done it really, really well. So just a huge thank you to our nurses, and I see our Director of Nursing and our high school and RISE nurse here, Mary Juliana, whose leadership has been exemplary this year through the most challenging circumstances. So if you haven't thanked the nurses or haven't thanked Mary, please take a minute to do it. They have really done, an amazing job this year. So shifting into the conversation tonight, as Tom shared, we have received a lot of emails that have come to the committee, a lot have come to me. Also, a lot of people have just, wrote individual notes to me, to our team, stopped me in schools or, out in the town to say certain things about their perspective. And I really do appreciate all of the perspective and feedback, and know that as you have feedback on anything, that's what we want to hear, not just related to masks, but anything. So thank you for all of you who've taken the time to share that, and also share that in a respectful way. Now, as I dive into what our recommendations are, for moving forward, I would like to emphasize that we have hard conversations in classrooms in our district all of the time. We talk about how do we have hard conversations with students, with staff in our buildings, and we encourage them to have it in a safe and respectful way. We encourage people to disagree. We encourage people to disagree respectfully. Now, I already know that everyone in the community does not see eye to eye on sort of what we should do or the best path forward for our students. But I believe strongly that everyone coming at this issue wants the same thing, and that's to keep our students in school learning safely and wants what's best for our kids. So I just want to say, even though I know there's a difference in views of how we move forward, I do believe that the core people want what's best for our Reading Public Schools students. So I ask that tonight, as we engage in this conversation, which I know was challenging and difficult, that we model for our students and for our community sort of what we expect to happen in the walls of our own schools. So jumping in, most people are likely know that I shared a letter in the school committee packet, which was also signed jointly by our Director of Nursing, Mary Juliana, our Reading Teachers Association President, Eric Goldstein, our Reading Director of Public Health, Ade Solarin, and our Reading Public Schools physician, Dr. Frank Pinchero, recommending to move to a mask optional environment effective February 28th, 2022. So I wanted to first, the reason why we have that letter signed jointly is this is a group that has been working collaboratively, amongst others too, throughout the year on all different things relating to pandemic response, whether it's, protocols with masking, distribution of test kits, all the other things that have come our way. We have worked collaboratively with different stakeholder groups in our community. So it's important that even on this issue, we felt that we showed a united front and worked together to put a recommendation we thought that was best for our students. So what we're going to do tonight is Mary, Julie, and I are going to walk through first a little bit of the logistics of what this would look, our recommendation would look like in practice, then share some of the rationale on how we arrived at this decision, and then also dive into what are just some of the frequently asked questions that we've heard over the past week to try to alleviate some of the concerns and questions that we know have been raised. Jumping into logistics, I apologize that this is really small print. I will do my best just to kind of amplify for the back of the room and those at home who may not be able to read this. The first piece is that the staff and students can wear masks by choice for the remainder of the school year. This should seem obvious. We want to emphasize we are not recommending a no mask environment. We are recommending a mask optional environment for our students and staff. And I think there's a big difference there. We will talk about later in the presentation the ways that we're being intentional about creating environments in our schools where students feel safe, comfortable to be able to make choices and not feel pressured to make choices at all different levels. But we want to again emphasize that this is a mask optional recommendation. Masks would still be required on buses per federal guidelines and also in health offices and medical waiting rooms. And we will follow DPH and DESE guidance around quarantine and close contacts, which is, here it reads, for those who can't see, individuals who are considered close contacts or who have tested positive must follow the isolation and quarantine guidance, which includes wearing a mask in public for 5 or more days after they leave isolation or quarantine on day 5. Again, aligned to DESE and DPH guidance. The other piece around DESE and DPH guidance is masks are still recommended for all unvaccinated individuals. That does apply to our RISE students, so we will speak a little bit more about what this is going to look like for RISE. We know that our RISE students have not had access to vaccinations in the same way as sort of our 5+ have, or over 5. So we're going to speak about that a little bit later on in the presentation. Then the last piece, which I think is really important for us, is that the administration will continue to use data-driven decision-making to target responses, including masking, to the shifting dynamics of the pandemic. These responses could be at various levels, grade, classroom, et cetera. So let me give a couple examples of that. We anticipate that moving forward, there could be a scenario where there is a particular outbreak in a classroom, right? We know that masks work, and we know that that is another mitigation strategy at our disposal, right? So if we see a scenario where there is an significant increase of cases and transmission in a particular class, in a particular grade level, in a particular sports team, right? That is a particular strategy that we can use to require masking sort of at that grade level or at that classroom level, at that team level, that is more responsive instead of coming out with a blanket district-wide sort of requirement for all. So again, want to just emphasize that that's something that our team is going to continue to monitor: school spread, classroom level spread, team level spread, things like that as we make decisions moving forward. This shift also is important to note that this, comes at a time where we are going to continue all of our current mitigation strategies. We will continue with our weekly pooled testing. As we know, every student and staff member has access to testing once a week on school site through pool testing. Distribution of 1 test kit per week. As you know, you get a take-home test kit for both students and staff to test at home. Testing opportunities for symptomatic individuals will continue, so students who are showing certain symptoms can test on site with our nurses. And then lastly, we'll continue to message the availability of vaccine and booster clinics for families and staff. There is a vaccine clinic tomorrow. For those, there's still actually some spaces available for those who haven't signed up. We plan to also continue to schedule some out 3 and 4 weeks down the line, sort of in that cycle. Now, we're going to take a little bit of time to talk through sort of what's the rationale, how do we arrive at the decision that we're arriving at now in broad strokes without getting sort of too far into the nitty-gritty, and then also talk through just some of the main questions we've heard around why the February 28th date, why RISE, what about RISE, how are we going to make this environment comfortable where students and staff feel it's actually a mask optional environment, and also how we're going to support our students and staff through the transition. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who's going to walk us through this part.
Okay, so we know that we have, as a district and as in all of our schools, we've applied the DESE and the DPH, who are working together, their guidance and their protocols throughout this school year and throughout the pandemic, and it has really helped us to keep our students healthy and safe and in-person learning. So we're going to continue to do that. So DESE has lifted their mask mandate as after several extensions as of February 28th, and our DPH, the Massachusetts DPH, just this week also updated their guidance saying that fully vaccinated individuals only need to mask indoors if they are immunocompromised, at high risk for because of age or medical condition, or if they have family members who are immunocompromised at high risk or who are unvaccinated. So that's sort of an update from DPH as well. And we know that also we work very closely with our public health department, and our Board of Health at their most recent meeting voted to lift their mask mandate. So we're keeping all of those things in mind and trying to align ourselves with the public health data and the public health guidance. In looking at where we are as a district, we feel very good about many of the metrics right now that are ongoing related to COVID. We know that most of our staff are currently vaccinated. We know we have very good vaccination rates amongst our students. Our high school students, we have 88% of the high school students are fully vaccinated. About 36% are also boosted at this point. More than 80% of our middle school students are vaccinated, and our elementary students across the 5 elementary schools, there's varying rates, but as a group, we have over 70% of our elementary school students who are vaccinated. So we feel very good about that. We also are hoping that our youngest students will have the opportunity to become, to be approved to receive vaccinations in the coming months. We also know that because of the outbreak, we have a number of students who did have COVID in the past 90 days, and so they also have immunity. So overall, we're looking at very good immunity in the individuals in our schools.
As Dr. Milichewski was saying, we have increased access to testing. When we think back even over the Christmas break, people were in long lines waiting to get tests. They couldn't, they weren't able to get COVID tests. We are now offering pool testing weekly in every single school, and every staff member and every student has access to a home kit. So if you haven't gotten a home kit from your student or if you're a staff member, they're still available. We have enough for everyone who wants one, and we highly encourage everyone to participate in that program and have those available. And we think that's a very important resource for us to have as a community. And also, most importantly, we're seeing decreased case numbers. So we know we had a spike, with the Omicron variant, and we're on the other side of that. So it's very reassuring to see those numbers drop. In the town, things are much improved, and our Board of Health is feeling more comfortable with, in terms of not having a mask mandate in our town buildings. And in our school, we have definitely seen our case numbers drop. So as a school community, we had a total of 13 cases over the past week, and some of our schools haven't had a case in the past week or 2 weeks. So we're very encouraged by those numbers. We will keep a very close eye on them, and we hope that they continue to decrease. So some of the considerations and questions that we've received, why February 28th? That is the date that DESE has chosen to lift the mask mandate. As I said, they had extended it for a number of times, and now they feel like the data across the state and in schools really supports the time now to be able to lift the mask mandate. I know that people are reflecting that we have an upcoming vacation. Looking back on our data, looking at our data now, we feel very good about where we're at right in the moment. We know that we had a spike after our Christmas vacation, but we feel that the situation was very different then. Like I said, we didn't have the access to testing. We knew that cases across the state were really spiking and increasing, and in our town as well. And we also didn't have the access. Our older students had been vaccinated but didn't have the access to boosters, and our elementary school students really were just starting to be vaccinated at that point. So it was a much different situation. We also looked back at our numbers from last February, and we did not see a spike at this point in the year coming back from our other vacations the way that we did from the Christmas vacation at that point. So those are some considerations. We met as a team with our public health department, our school physician, and made sure that everyone felt comfortable that this is a time that we feel is safe for us to go mask optional. And I think as a team we felt that this was a good time. So the next consideration, as we've mentioned, RISE is a very unique situation. It's our youngest students. We really want to be able to support them and their families, and we realize that this is a very challenging time for parents of young children, and we hope that, I know some are disappointed that it's taken a little bit longer to get the vaccine approval, but we hope that that will be coming for them, and we want to make sure that they feel well supported. The RISE population actually did not fall under the DESE's mandate. It was for K-12 and older than 5 years, but we have always asked our RISE students if they were able to wear masks in class, and an amazing number of them do very, very well with it. So we will continue to recommend, because they are unvaccinated, that our RISE students, if they're able to, continue to mask. And we will ask our RISE staff, because they're working with a population that is unvaccinated, to also continue to mask, both because they're working with the students and because they want to model for the students who will be continuing to wear masks. So we realize that there's a number of populations, so it's recommended for all of our unvaccinated students to continue to wear masks. And there's also other situations that masks are required. So on our buses, that's a federal mandate. In our health offices, students will be required to wear masks, as well as students returning from a COVID diagnosis. If it's been not that 10-day isolation period, if they're coming back before the 10 days, after 5 days perhaps, they would need to wear a mask in school. So there will be a number of different reasons why students and staff will be wearing masks in school. And another reason is that some people just, even if the masks are optional, they will not feel comfortable. They will still want to wear masks. And we want to really encourage and support that for any staff and any student who feel more comfortable wearing masks. And so we believe that by making masks optional, it will be, it's a safe environment now for us to make them optional, although we know many of our staff and students will still be wearing masks. And we want to be able to support all of our students and all of our staff through this transition. We have an excellent team. It's called our district support team, made up of our nurses, our school psychologists, our school counselors, and our school social workers, and we meet monthly. We've already met this month and have discussed what this might look like, and we know that this will be, a change for a lot of people, and that some may have some anxiety, some concern about it. And so members of this team have actually done an amazing job already of putting together some resources for our students. We have some social stories, some questions and answers, some FAQs to support our students of all ages and to help them with this transition. These resources can be given out, during the by the school, the teachers and the principals, and we also know that some of our students may need some individualized support if they're having anxiety about this. So we're prepared to very much support all of our students. We realize that this is sort of a turning point, I think, in our community. And hopefully a turning point, towards better days for sure. In the Massachusetts DPH update this week, there was, a statement that really resonated with me, and it was that we are moving towards a model of personal responsibility and also best practices in risk reduction. We know that COVID-19 is here to stay with us, but we know that we can also manage the risk. And I think that that's where we are now, that we understand masks keep us safe, and they have kept us safe in in-person learning, but we're at a point where it is safe to make the mask optional, because we do believe, although they keep us safe, it's not optimal learning when all of our kids and staff are wearing masks. So I'm happy that we're at this point that we can move forward.
Great, thank you both. Is there anything further from the administration? No? Okay, so we'll move to the committee and their individual statements if they have any. I had no order necessarily, so does anybody want to go first? Chuck?
Thank you. I won't use the 5 minutes.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to, thank the thoughtful and thorough analysis and process that staff has gone through. I mean, it's just, throughout all of this, you've been phenomenal in keeping us up to date and keeping the community up to date. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank all the community members who reached out to us, and we always appreciate that, and with differing opinions. In terms of, a big thing in all the data or the emails and conversations we have, everyone references data. And, I'm not a medical person, so, that I really appreciate that the staff is reviewing the data and making a recommendation to the committee, which is the way I think it should be. I don't think that we, as a committee, should be getting down into the weeds of all the data on either side. So I rely on what you've done, and I appreciate that. Having said that, one piece of data that I hear, a lot of it more anecdotally, is just the impact, this emotional impact this has had on kids. And that's our first responsibility, is the kids, and also the staff. You've heard me say many times that our assets walk out the door every night. So I was really appreciative that, Eric Goldstein, the president of the RTA, was involved in the decision-making process. I think that's really important, that not only are we first and foremost supporting our students, but we're also, mindful of our employees. And so I think that you did a wonderful job of balancing that, so thank you. I guess I'll let other people talk, but I guess, I'm in full support of this recommendation, and I will vote for it. Again, you're the people that we employ every day to come to us as a committee with recommendations, and our decision should be high level, not down in the weeds where you are. So again, thank you, and I'm going to vote to move forward with this. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thanks, Tom. So I outlined my thoughts. This is obviously a very meaty topic. Let me move these over. And not black and white. There's a lot of gray here. So I don't ramble. I did outline them, so if it looks like I'm reading from a paper, it's because I am. So first, to echo what Chuck was saying, I do want to thank all of the community members who took the time to reach out and share their feelings and their experiences. We've all walked through this past 2 years very differently, I think, and had different experiences. So I appreciate hearing from all of you, the phone calls and the emails. So while the feedback did vary greatly, based on personal experiences, I think what's clear is that our families care a lot about the physical and mental health of our students and about their learning as well. Thank you, Tom and Mary, for working together along with some of our other key community stakeholders to bring forward your recommendation. It was very thoughtful, what you outlined in the packet, your presentation tonight, the recommendations to go mask optional, the safety and mitigation strategy around trends we're currently seeing in our community. So our current numbers, I'm excited to say, are 26.3 cases per 100,000 people and 5.52 test positivity rate, which puts us strongly in the CDC moderate COVID transmission category. So that's exciting after the past couple months of the latest surge with Omicron. Given these rates and the relatively high vaccination rates, which I'm also thrilled about in our schools, I agree it's likely a safe time to relax our masking requirements. We all need a break. I do think that should be taken into consideration with the decision that we make around the mask policy. So I do agree with the timing. However, I do think it's important to recognize that doing this is not risk-free. There are still populations, to Mary and Tom's point, about that cannot be vaccinated or under 5s. We have students and staff that are vulnerable and higher risk for severe infection. So if we do decide to transition to a mask optional environment at this point, I think we really need a strong plan for how and when they might need to be put back in place. COVID's not yet endemic, whether we want to hear that or not. The pandemic is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's far from over. There will be additional waves. There is going to be another severe strain at some point in the future. So I strongly believe we should take breaks from the more restrictive mitigation strategies when we can, such as masking, and we need to set ourselves up for success in the future. In schools without mask mandates, studies have shown that in-school transmission numbers have tended to mirror the rates in the community. So I think removing the universal masking, we need to be prepared to see an increased number of cases in in-school transmission, and along with that, have a plan to reduce cases and keep kids in school. This is not different than any of our other health and safety related policies. We have protocols in place for how to address an emergency and the appropriate tools that we need. We have sprinkler systems, fire extinguishers, and evacuation plans in the case of a fire. We don't throw them out just because we haven't had a fire recently. This is exactly the same. I see it the same way. We use certain mitigation strategies when the circumstances warrant their use during the pandemic, opening windows, installing specific air filters, going outside for class, social distancing, our hands over and over and over again, and wearing masks. So in our discussion as a committee today, I'd like to urge us to continue to make data-driven decisions that are in the best interest of our students and follow the recommendation of experts. So public health officials, epidemiologists, et cetera. Wherever we ultimately land tonight, it should be based on local data and metrics, not an arbitrary date on the calendar. So when we voted to approve our current mask policy on August 20th, just for reference, this was prior to DESE putting their mask mandate in place, which they later did on August 25th. At the August 20th meeting, we talked a lot about following the guidance of public health experts, not an education policy body such as DESE, and to make data-driven decisions around the policy we put in place. We also agreed that our priority is to maintain in-person learning. Having a multi-layered mitigation strategy in place has allowed us to continue in-person learning this year with very little interruption, even during a massive COVID surge this winter. So all of that, given that Massachusetts Department of Public Health strongly recommends indoor masking for unvaccinated individuals, and the CDC recommends universal indoor masking in areas of substantial or high transmission, I'd like to suggest that we make a couple of changes to the policy. First, I recommend we revise it to mask optional when community transmission levels align with CDC lower risk categories. I think that aligning our policy to a known public health framework clearly communicates to the community why we're making the decision to go mask optional right now and what change in COVID transmission would require us to pivot. Second, I would like to talk about the date. The February 28th date does make me nervous. Everybody's going to be traveling, coming back into buildings. I'd like to suggest and discuss possibly moving it to March 7th to allow us to look at that date, look at the data over that week after break and ensure we're still in a safe range and we still feel comfortable with what we've laid out. And then finally, I'd like to ensure that the superintendent, to your point, Tom, that you have the authority to mandate the use of masks to address outbreaks that don't affect the entire community if community-wide transmission levels are still in alignment with lower risk categories. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to go next? Sean?
Sure. So I want to echo the thanks from everybody else about the many emails, phone calls, and text messages that I know we've all received. Regardless of somebody's individual opinion, really is welcome. And many of the emails on both sides of this case, both sides of this argument, pointed out something new for us to consider, which I always find useful. I do want to start by laying out some of the premises of the position that I'm going to take tonight. I know that not everybody may agree with all of these, but these are sort of my best understanding of what we've learned and where we are after 2 years of the pandemic. So first, masks do work. They work in the communal sense where consistent mask usage, even if they aren't of the highest quality, can reduce transmission within groups and in public spaces. Dr. Lopez, who's the chair of the Board of Health, did a much better job of laying out that case than I could in last week's Board of Health meeting, so I'd encourage folks to check that out if you doubt that argument. The second thing, though, that we've learned is that masks also work to protect the wearer when they are a high quality and a well-fitted mask, and that's an important consideration as well. We've learned that everybody, not just kids, but everybody, is suffering in some way as a result of this pandemic, whether it's a reaction to the lockdowns and masks or whether it's just the very natural human response to the immense loss of the last 2 years. Those impacts also have to be part of this discussion. I think the last thing that I wanted to just point out is that, while it is not yet an endemic, I think the horse is likely out of the barn in terms of that happening eventually. I think we've seen in parts of the world where they're striving for COVID-0, like Hong Kong and New Zealand, with much more significant public health interventions. Even there, they've been unable to eliminate the risk of COVID flare-ups. And so what that tells us is that eliminating the risk, and Mary, you alluded to a lot of this, eliminating the risk is not possible or can't be the target at this point. And so our response has to change both in this transitional stage and again, once it does go endemic. So with those ideas as a backdrop, I also spent a lot of time thinking about the reasons why we implemented a mask mandate in the first place. So one reason was to contribute to the public health goal of reducing the spread. As society and our town have moved into a phase where we're no longer masking for adults, I can't really rationalize putting that burden on our kids. The second is to reduce the physical risk to our kids. With reasonably high and climbing vaccination rates in our schools and what we know about the importance and usefulness of high-quality masks, that argument, too, has lost some of its impact. The third is simply that at present, testing positive for COVID means kids and staff not being able to come to school. I don't know if people appreciate how close we were to having significant disruptions in early January from a staffing perspective and what that would have looked like. That concern remains for me, but I do think we need to think about it differently, and I'm thinking in a similar vein as Sarah in terms of being more flexible and more data-driven there, not a broad, indefinite mandate going forward. So those are sort of the primary considerations in my mind as I've evaluated this decision. Where I've landed is I do believe it's time for us to move into a phase where masks are optional in the very near future. That makes a lot of sense to me. I agree with Sarah. I think February 28th was a bit short-sighted on the part of the state. The reason that mask optional makes sense for us today is given the low rate of transmission here in our community. When you think about a vacation week or a holiday, a long weekend from a holiday, we've had this experience multiple times now. Families head off to tournaments or competitions or just out on vacation. They're often going to places where community transmission is much higher. And so I do worry about the impact of having a bunch of folks come back, and by week 2, post-break, we're finding ourselves having to take mitigation steps again that we've finally just relaxed. So I think March 7th is a reasonable, sort of a reasonable bogey there. I also think that this new phase means we, as Sarah said, we have to be clear-eyed that this pandemic isn't over. And if we find ourselves where we were in early January at the peak of the surge, or God forbid, a strain emerges that's much more virulent for kids, we are going to need to react to that, and we can't be caught flat-footed. So I'd like to see us do 2 things. First is creating a set of clear guidelines for when masking may again be necessary based on community transmission. And the second, and you alluded to some of this, Tom, in your presentation, but the second is granting the superintendent in consultation with appropriate health officials the ability to implement localized or district-wide mandates on an emergency basis for no more than 2 weeks at a time. If multiple kids in a single preschool classroom test positive on March 9th, we can't have our hands tied and tell the parents that they have to choose whether or not to send their unvaccinated kid to school and take no short-term mitigation measures to protect those kids. So this would only be on an emergency basis. We would direct the superintendent and the staff to be as targeted as possible, and extensions would require school committee approval. So that's where I land on all of this. Just to recap, the three things I'd like to see are a clear framework for what future conditions might merit reinstituting a mandate, an effective date of March 7th, and then clearly delineated authority and expectation for the superintendent to respond on a limited basis as necessary. My bar for a good compromise is that everybody has something to be disappointed about, and my hope is that this proposal threads that needle. Thank you.
Okay. Aaron?
I'll go. I didn't prepare a statement. I thought about it, and I just decided I was going to wing it, so please bear with me. First of all, Tom and Mary, thank you so much. You guys have put so much time and energy into this, and I am very grateful for your collaborative approach, for your very thoughtful, careful approach, for answering all my questions every time I have questions, which is pretty much every time, and how transparent you're being about this process. I think it benefits all of us. This has been literally consuming me for the past 2 weeks. I've not thought about much else. I don't take this vote or decision lightly at all. I am so grateful for everyone who has reached out, for the letters, for the phone calls, for the texts. I've heard from more people on this than I think I have on any other topic in my 2 years as a school committee member, which just tells me how important it is to all of you. I've tried to listen. I've tried to solicit information. I've reached out to teacher friends in other states. I have a teacher friend in another country. You know, how's it going over there? I've just really tried to take in as much information as I can. That being said, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a data analyst, I'm not an epidemiologist, and I don't pretend to be. First and foremost, I'm a mom. I have 3 children in the schools, and every decision that I make impacts them as much as it impacts your children. And every time that we have come back to this topic or discussion, I've spoken with Dr. Milichewski, and I've said, you know, well, what does Mary say? Well, you know, what are the teachers saying? Because that is also very important to me. What is the Board of Health saying? And I've often relied on that information to help inform me. I think I definitely agree that masks work, that masks have helped get us to where we are in terms of, our attendance and keeping kids in school. I also agree there are many negative impacts, right? It's difficult for kids learning to read, facial expressions, for kids who are hard of hearing, for kids trying to learn foreign language, for kids learning social cues, socialization in general. The list is long. I think if anyone followed our budget process most recently, the picture painted was one of great need for mental health support in our schools. The stories are heartbreaking. So that's where my decision is coming from, excuse me. I want to bear in mind that we will still have several important mitigation strategies in place. I think the pooled testing is an important option. I think the take-home tests are an important option. I think that it's very important that we have a culture of respect and appreciation for individual choices. I think if there's anything that our kids have learned throughout this is that different families have different needs and that we need to make different choices for different families. And I hope that It really will not be one where kids are shamed for choosing to wear a mask or shamed for choosing not to wear a mask when we move in this direction. And I also do think it's very important that the administration have the ability to react quickly if there is, a lot of cases in a class or on a team at the middle school or, whatever it may be. I don't want to have to wait for us to come back and meet and discuss it. And I want you to be able to react quickly to keep everyone safe. But I also don't think it requires remasking the whole district when that happens. So I know that was a little all over the place, but like I said, I have always gone to you when we need to make these decisions. Your letter was extremely helpful to me. It was even more than I was anticipating, getting to see all the names of who backed it. So I weigh that very heavily, and I'll be supporting your recommendation.
Carla?
You have a statement.
When it comes to our children, we are passionate. This is evident by the sheer number of emails that we received and by the amount of the people in this room. This has been a long 2 years for everyone. One inevitable fact is that we are most likely not going to get rid of COVID, and we must learn how to live with it. The good news is that each variant appears to weaken as it mutates. This is promising news. One of my biggest struggles throughout this pandemic was contemplating how this virus affected our most vulnerable populations, our children and our elderly. The difference between these two populations is that this virus was of great threat to seniors, but not so much for kids. Our policies for protection have adversely and negatively affected our children. We as a society have placed a great burden on our children to keep us safe, and it is evidenced by the mental health statistics that they are suffering. We as a community have recently approved a budget which adds 7 adjustment counselors, mental health positions, and supports. We have recognized that our children are suffering, our teachers are struggling. It's time to allow personal and parental choice in regards to mask wearing. Children are allowed to go to the grocery store, out to dinner, to church, and other venues without wearing a mask, but they have to wear a mask at school. We are intimating to them that school is a scary and dangerous place, while it's not. We have allowed there to be different rules for adults than for kids. Professional athletes don't have to mask during games, but our high school athletes do. At a conference of state-level superintendents and school committee members, masks were not worn, but children and teachers are required to mask each and every day. Besides a message of hypocrisy, what message are we sending to our children? If we do vote to repeal the masking policy this evening, there's going to be an adjustment period for the students and staff. I liken it to an animal coming out of hibernation, dazed and hesitant. There will be many reasons why somebody would gladly discard their mask, while others will be hesitant and fearful to remove them. We have to have grace and compassion with one another and respect for personal choices. Everyone here is fighting for their children. Some are fearful of the virus and its repercussions. Some are fearful of the vaccine and potential long-term side effects. Some are concerned with the mental health or developmental delays exhibited by their children. Let us have the compassion and grace with one another moving forward. I will be voting in agreement with the recommendation of our superintendent, nurses, teachers, district physician, and director of public health to remove the masking mandates and allow for personal choice for staff, parents, and students moving forward.
Okay, so as the last one to speak, hold myself to the same accountability of 5 minutes I hold everybody else accountable to. I'll echo the thanks, and I'm going to cut the thanks short so I can do the rest, but thank you so much. You know, we look back on the year, we look back on the couple of years that we've been through, and it's been a hard process for all of us. There frankly is no right answer, right? We're working through this together as a group. It's been unfortunately a politically charged atmosphere, but I'm happy to say that from a committee perspective, we haven't been that way. We worked together on this from an administration perspective. We worked together on this across the board, and I think it's evidenced by the continual collaboration that we saw with the letter coming out. That was, I don't know if people realize how monumental that letter was and where it came from, and that's just evidence of the continued work that this administration team and by extension us, but mostly the administration team are doing. As I look at this and I think about this, I think we're ultimately this is a trade-off conversation. There's a pro and con on both sides. There's a pro to masks, there's a con to masks. And I think at this point in time, the pro of mask is far smaller than the con of masks. We've seen, you know, vaccination rates go through the roof from where they were back in August when we first had this conversation. As Mary outlined, you know, some of our schools are well past 80%, or even our elementary schools mostly are well past 70%. Our population at large in Reading is in the high 80s to low 90s. It's a really highly vaccinated population as it stands right now. And I think that's an important factor. And I think we saw that with the Omicron surge. While there was many people that got infected, overall the virility or the severity of that was significantly lower than what we saw when it first came out 2 years ago. And so looking at that and thinking about that is a huge portion of what I'm putting in my thought process here. The child impact, you know, some of my peers here have already discussed some of that, whether it's learning to read and not being able to see lips, whether it's, you know, not being able to understand through a mask, other things along those lines, not being able to breathe properly if you have anxiety or asthma. There's all sorts of impacts that we've heard and seen, the social emotional that many people have addressed as well, and the budget impacts that we're going to see, we have already agreed to, and we'll see for the next 2, 3, 4 years as we work through this as well, are severe. And I think it's time to start turning the page, frankly. And looking at it, and I am a data analyst. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I am a data analyst, and looking at the data and looking at the trends, the vaccination number jumps out. But one number that we as a committee did not agree to look at, that I've been spending a lot more time looking at lately, is the MWRA BioBot data. And that number, we are in a better place now than we have been since July 24th of last year. And if you look at it and compare it to February of last year, we're in a better place than we were in February of last year as well. As I was talking with my wife, and pardon me, but everybody poops. So MWRA is going to catch it. They're not going to catch the test that nobody reports or anything else, but they will catch that. And that number is lower than it has been. That number also helped me understand what happened last year in February and last year in April. And there was no surge in those periods of time as well. Doesn't mean there won't be this time. So that's, you know, the past is no indicator of the future necessarily, but it's an important barometer to look at and see where things stand. You know, as we look at it, I applaud the approach that the administration's put forward with regards to targeted updates as necessary as well. If it's a classroom that's going through a surge, we can address that in a one-off scenario. If it's a school that's going through a surge, we can address that in a one-off scenario. If it's a team, whether it's a school team or an outside team, I would hope and request that the committee would allow us to address that in a one-off scenario. We have seen more of our outbreaks across teams outside the school system than we have inside the school system. So I'm hoping that the community will work with us on that as we do it. And for that reason, I mean, I'm also in favor of the letter that's been put forward. I'm in favor of rescinding the policy completely, effective as the date they asked for it, which is 2/28. And so, you know, as we work through this and as we work to hear from the community a little bit more tonight, that will be the motion that we'll put on the table, since I now hear 4 people in that vein. And we'll go from that. So with that said, there are 11 names in this red hat. So I don't feel a need to necessarily stop the 11th person from speaking, okay? But I'm not going to let anybody that's not in this hat speak. So just to keep ourselves moving, I hope you recognize that and appreciate that. And I am now done speaking. So the first person, from a community perspective, that will be asked to speak, and I would ask that you follow our process as well. Please state your name, state the street that you live on, so we can put that in our minutes appropriately. And I'm going to keep you to 2 minutes. And what we're going to do here is, I have a red and a yellow. Please respect the 2 minutes so everybody else can speak and so we can continue with the rest of our meeting. Yellow will give you a 30-second warning. Red will mean its time is up. Okay? So please follow that. Please, we will give you the grace that you have given us, and thank you very much. So I think this is Pam Sorrentino is the first person? Dom? Okay, thank you, Dom. Sorry about that.
Dom Sorrentino, Glenmere Circle. Thank you for having us. Thank you all for voicing your opinion and allowing us to voice ours. I have 3 young daughters, and I'm not against the mask, but wearing the mask, allowing them to wear the mask really scares me for the emotional damage. They don't like wearing them. My daughter in kindergarten just brought home a self-portrait last week, and it was sad looking at it because she's supposed to paint this beautiful picture of her own face, and all I could see was her hair, her eyes, and a big pink piece of paper across the rest of her face, because that's what she saw herself as, and she shouldn't. She should see herself as a beautiful girl. So please allow the girls and our boys, all the children, to take the mask off. Thank you.
Second person is Brian Paulson.
Members of the school committee, administration, Mary Juliana, members of the community. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of a large group of concerned parents that couldn't make it. If someone told me that 2 years into 2 weeks to flatten the curb, I would be fighting for my children's right to breathe fresh air, I would have said you are out of your minds. But here we are. Everybody said how our children are suffering, and they're not wrong. And I don't even think we're going to scratch the surface for many, many years of the damage that's done to these kids. But I'll give you a sneak peek. Tell them they can take off their mask and see how many don't do it. My 7th grader says all of her friends hate it, but they're scared, not from catching COVID, but showing their face. 7th grade girls and boys, afraid to show their face. It's horrible, right? And for the members of the community that are nervous about going maskless or mask optional, my 2nd grade son has been in private school since last year. Last year they had to wear masks. This year they were mask optional. You know what the difference between this year and last year with cases? 0. There's no change. They shut down for the week before Christmas because there was 50 close contacts. 50. And their school's not big. So that's like a third of the students. Not one of those close contacts tested positive for COVID. I got 30 seconds left. Let's teach these kids that school is a safe place to go to. Nobody's talked about this, but let's get rid of those plastic barriers in the cafeteria. I saw it today at Coolidge. It was horrible. To wrap it all up, let's lift the mask mandate, make it optional. But let's do it right now. Let's not wait till the 28th. Let's do it right now. Let's one more day and send them off to break with a little bit of hope. Thank you.
So I'm going to just one request, please. I appreciate that everybody's happy for what people are saying, but we do want to move and get the 20 minutes, but allow the 11 people to speak too. So every clap slows that down. So please, at the end, if you want to clap, by all means, but do one of these or something else. So thank you. The next person is Chris Haley.
Thank you, Christopher Haley. 71 Tennyson Road, and now 6th grade math genius. After seeing the numbers in the packet, the graphs, and what was presented tonight, this committee has a difficult decision to make. But if we can step back for a moment, I believe the pathway forward is overwhelmingly clear. At this committee's prior meeting, it unanimously voted 6-0 to approve the FY23 budget. Contained in that budget and subsequently highlighted in an email to all Reading school parents is the dire issue facing our students and the town in general, for that matter, which is the mental health crisis. This committee is adding 8 full-time positions under the support students' social and emotional needs section. These roles will be critical in providing more social, emotional support to students, among other duties. I appreciate this committee and administration taking the steps to address the mental health crisis facing our students and seriously and having the forethought to add them into the latest budget. While masks themselves are not the definitive reason for the crisis, they have indeed contributed to the overall issues stemming from the pandemic and provide a daily reminder that things are not changing. It may be harder for students to hear and understand speech and identify facial expressions and emotions when people are wearing masks. Consider the impact on students' emotional and mental health well-being, as well as these children unable to learn and read facial cues and cannot see what their friends are smiling or frowning. Very young children are leaning towards learning towards navigating the world, learning to make friends, learning to have empathy for others. It's very hard and stressful for young children to achieve these critical developmental milestones in schools with masks covering half their faces. Sean, Tom, Chuck, Carla, Aaron, and Sarah, you all have the opportunity tonight to get our children, especially our youngest learners, back on the right pathway forward. I want to close with a story what someone who works at Austin Prep told me. He said last Friday there, after the Reading Board of Health rescinded the mask mandate, it was like the Red Sox winning the World Series for the first time. All of the kids were happy and ecstatic. He's never seen anything like it. Tonight is the first step of many this committee can take to right the ship, just like you did in January. It can't wait until March. I can guarantee, though, if you put a camera outside every one of these schools and video what happens to them at 8 a.m. on the 28th, you can get the duck boats ready. Thank you for your time.
Please look up every so often so you can see the cues appropriately. I'm trying not to interrupt because I don't want to be rude in that process, so please pay attention to the times. Alicia Williams.
Tom, maybe you could let the person know who's on deck.
What's that?
Maybe you could let the person know who's on deck.
Sure.
Keep things rolling.
That's a good idea. The next person is going to be, interestingly, not going to be Brian Paulson because he's already spoken. So he's putting a few names in the hat.
Trying to game the system, huh, Brian?
Okay, after that, it's going to be Andrena Silva.
I just actually want to say thank you to the committee. I really appreciate everything everybody said. It was awesome. I don't have much to add. I do want to refute Sarah saying that there'll absolutely be a new strain. We don't know that. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. It could disappear. Who knows? I do have a logistical question in terms of the plexiglass and how is that? Do we have a plan for that? Do we, if you do all vote, which I think you're all going to vote, lift the mandate, how will that affect the rest of the protocols? So that's just my question for the committee.
Do you mind if I answer?
Go ahead.
And we haven't yet talked, as a team yet about the plexiglass, so I think, we're trying to just focus on sort of this part and then move forward with that, but that's something we would have an answer to in the short term, so I apologize that we haven't sort of got that far down the road yet. That's a good question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. I'll follow up with you individually and also share that out with school communities too. Thank you.
Okay, so after Andrena, just for the next, is I'm pronouncing that properly?
It's Andrena.
Andrena, okay, thank you. We'll have Tim Matthew.
Okay, so I'm Andrena Silva, 96 Beaver Road. And to piggyback on what Chris said, my babysitter just texted me and asked if my kids can stay up because they're so excited to hear, or hopefully hear, that we're getting rid of this mandate. So just to kind of give you a glimpse of kind of the children, like they want these masks done. So I'll just keep it short and to the point. It's time to unmask our kids. Let's be done with the mandates. Let's give the choices back to the parents, because that's really ultimately where it belongs. They've sacrificed enough. They're suffering. We all know that. They're suffering emotionally. They're suffering academically. My first grader is not reading. He is not doing well in spelling. They need to take their masks off, and the teachers well, they'll have their choice. It's our job as parents, as a community, and your job as a school committee to protect them and to protect their innocence. It's not the other way around. It's not their job to protect us, okay? They'll never get their childhood back, and I believe with my whole heart that we're stealing it from them. It's enough. It's enough with the mask, and it's enough with the plastic barriers. It's enough with them feeling like they're in jail, like they need to keep their friends safe, like those statements. It's enough, okay? It's just resulting in too much anxiety. Let's let the kids be kids. Let's focus our energy on the community and on the people that need protection, you know, the elderly, the immunocompromised, and those with comorbidities, not the kids. It's time to let the kids be kids and give the choice back to the families. Let's end the mask mandate, and let's end it tonight. Let's not wait tonight. Thank you.
Okay, as Tim works his way up, the next one will be Aaron Oliveria.
So first, I'd just like to be clear, is your vote tonight, is that official, or is that a recommendation to the Board of Health? Who has the ultimately deciding authority?
The vote tonight is for our policy. We have the authority over our buildings. So it is our fault. It's not a recommendation. The recommendation came from the administration, but the policy is owned by the school committee. The vote that we make tonight will be about that policy and will be final.
Okay, great. So I'll keep my comments brief. I think they'll be abridged because of the direction the meeting's gone in. But again, my name's Tim Matthew of Briarwood Avenue. My job each and every day is to work with the scientists at the CDC and the NIH, working on COVID and polio and tuberculosis and cancer and so on. As a result, I spend a lot of time reading research studies and papers. Obviously, science nowadays has been politicized by both sides of the aisle. But the objective scientists would acknowledge that many of the studies that policy is being based on have a lot of flaws. But more importantly, one thing that has not been studied is the long-term implications of the most prolonged masking of children probably in human history. And that's what this has been these last roughly year and a half or so. When my children were at the high school, the school year started, I went in September to a meeting at the PAC where Mr. Tracy was the first time the community heard from Mr. Tracy. And it was very concerning that at the very first meeting, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the school year, he stated to parents, he offered a warning to watch over the kids because there was a lot of exhibition of anxiety and depression. So we're at a stage now where we have the opportunity to make a decision to try to right the ship and start moving it in the right direction. We appreciate your support for doing that. Thank you.
As Erin works her way up, the next person will be Evan Valera.
Hi, I'm Erin Oliveira, 87 Hancock Street. I am here to stand up for the voices that can't be here because they're all home sleeping. Hoping that tomorrow they will wake up maskless. Erin, I stand with you. These kids desperately need them gone. The anxiety, the crippling effects that this is having on our community. You will never go into a public health situation seeing healthy people wear masks. When you go to a hospital pre-COVID, the only people that were masked in a hospital were nurses or people that were extremely contagious. I spent 8 days in a hospital and not once was I ever masked myself. Anyone else that had a contagious illness or disease was required to wear a mask. Why are we masking healthy children? Why are our healthy kids being asked to suffocate themselves for 6 hours a day? There's no mask break in school. They go out for recess for 20 minutes, and it's the only time, actually only this year, it's the only time they're allowed to remain unmasked. They can't, the first half of the year, the beginning of the pandemic, they couldn't even turn around and talk to a friend. They couldn't refer to their peers. How does a child even know what an emotion is if they cannot see it? This is what they see all day long from their teachers. This is what it sounds like. This is what it looks like. This is scary. And this has been their lives for 24 months. How are you supposed to learn? How am I supposed to learn a speech or a language? This is the difference. You can see my mouth. You can see my emotion. Thank you. My piece has been said. No mask.
While Evan works his way up, Ed Ross will be next.
Hi, Evan Valera, 21 Overlook Road. We've had 2 years and multiple virus variants. That data's been given to everyone. All of the parents have been doing their own research, listening to other people, experts, non-experts who think they're experts. The one common thing, there's been hybrid schooling, there's been full virtual, there's been full masks, there's been no masks at schools nationwide. The one common thing, there's no study that shows that the kids who didn't wear masks at schools were being affected any worse than the kids who were. They're doing better than the kids who were staying home. They're doing better than the kids who were wearing masks. Mentally, in school, no mask, seeing teachers' faces, seeing friends' faces. I've got a son who doesn't recognize certain kids because he only sees them with the mask on. We go to hockey, and I'm like, oh, isn't he in your class? And he's like, I think so, and he doesn't recognize them. My niece has a speech impediment. She's getting pulled from her class to work on that because of the masking. She needs to be able to see mouths to read. My kindergartner is being told during lunchtime or snack time to sit, eat, and not talk. She's in kindergarten. Like, come on. It's time for the masks to be done, not February 28th, like last month, last year. The time is now, no more. Thank you.
And after Ed, the last one would be Brian Curry.
Thanks. Ed Ross, 16 Kensington Ave. I'll be brief because Chris stole all my time anyways. So I really wanted to thank, again, and echo what a lot of the committee said already. Thank you to the administration for all of the research, the cross-section of research, and most of what's been said tonight is we've kind of covered everything. So I'll kind of give the time back. Thank you.
And this is our last speaker.
My name is Brian Curry. I live at 774 Haverhill Street, and I was hoping the students that presented earlier could read my statement, because I think they probably do a little bit better, but best I can. So I have 2 children. I have a 4-year-old that is going to be impacted by tonight's decision, and I'm respectfully asking that you end the mandate. I think the last 2 years, first off, I want to say, all of you have donated your time, school committee, so we appreciate that. And also want to thank everyone for allowing me to speak. I think everyone has their own opinions, and at this point, I do not think this is a hard decision. There's been a lot of hard decisions the last 2 years. There are 43 states in our country that do not have mask mandates. Most of those states do not allow masks in school. The governor of Massachusetts ended the mandate. The town of Reading ended the mandate. DESE is requesting that we end the mandate. The superintendent is requesting that we end the mandate. And now we have a decision up to 6 individuals that are representing 80 to 90% of people here do not want to continue with the masks. So it's an emotional time. I didn't think I'd get emotional, but just thinking about all of these parents. There's a lot of studies, and I think it's hard to determine which studies are accurate. There's a Brown study that said children that have been born after the pandemic have had their IQ reduced by 20 points. I don't know if that is accurate, but there are many, many parents that have spoken tonight and wrote emails saying how their children's speech has been impacted, how socialization has been impacted, anxiety. I really wish those kids were here. But I do get emotional. I spent 3 months away from my daughter because I took COVID very seriously, and she was an infant in 2020, but that was 2 years ago. And we're just asking for choice. We respect anyone that wants to wear a mask, and we think that is fine. We just want our own children to have their own time and their own choice to wear the mask if they want, and if they don't, then that is what we want. Thank you.
Okay. A couple of quick points, just real quick. And Dr. Milichewski, jump in and correct where necessary. I've heard the request that we end it immediately. And that's, we are still regulated by DESE, and DESE has said it can't end for anybody less than, any school less than 80% until the 28th, which would mean we can't end it for elementaries until the 28th. Our elementaries are at 77, 74, 71, 66, and 74%, so they don't meet that criteria. There's really only one school day we're talking about between now and then, so let's also be realistic about it. It's tomorrow. But if we are to go forward with a recommendation from the administration, it would be repealed effectively like 12:01 in the morning on the 28th of February, which meant that when they come back from February vacation, masks would be optional at that point in time. Align with the rest of the recommendations from the administration as well. Recommended for certain people, et cetera, et cetera. RISE would be recommended as you follow through that. So having heard as well from the committee where we are, the motion I'm putting forward is a motion to repeal policy EBCFA effective 12:01 February 28, 2022.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Now, is there any further discussion amongst the committee? Sean.
Very briefly. I thought it was important to say my piece. I do think, I do think we need to acknowledge that as long as the quarantine and isolation procedures are in place, we are inviting some risk of additional absences, right? So let's all just sort of be clear-eyed about that. That being said, I hear what everybody else in the committee had to say. I hear what everybody in the audience had to say. I think it's important that we move together on this, and I'm happy to vote in support of rescinding the policy.
Anybody else have any further? Sarah?
Can I just ask some clarifying questions, Dr. M, about what you're thinking in terms of, I'm not sure what the right words are, but a protocol, operational protocol, maybe that's the right thing to call it, that you and I assume would work with Mary in a day from Board of Health of what that would look like. Because what I want to be clear that while I think we're all saying the same thing, that we feel like right now this could work, I just don't want there to be surprises if and when things change. So how do we communicate that? If that's not through the policy, which would have been my preference, to lay a guardrails, what does that look like through the administration?
Great question, and I appreciate that. I think we've thought a lot about it as the administrative team too, we've heard from various community members around using a certain framework to say, if we have this amount of spread in our community, match that with our vaccination rates, then sort of that would lead us to maybe using masks sort of more universally. We felt that would be a challenge for us to we felt would box us in because we wouldn't be able to be responsive to what the trends may be at certain classrooms, at certain grade levels, or at certain schools. We just think that there's been so many instances where sort of cases have been in sort of pockets, but not necessarily universally. So I think that's something that has made us a little bit nervous about using sort of a more comprehensive, broad framework for the district. Now, we've thought aloud, is there something we can use that's more specific sort of to say, like, if there's X amount of, percentage of students in a classroom, then we will move to, implement sort of a mask mandate at that class. And I think we all know there's so much, there's so much difference in terms of different in classrooms. Like, for example, the vaccination rates, sort of the when students were infected, the amount of students who were in the class. So students may come in, come out for different, sort of parts of their day. I think it's difficult for us to kind of pin down an exact amount to say this is what we are sort of comfortable with to say to set like a bar. I think I share all that to say, I think there is unfortunately, some sort of subjectivity that has to come into play here, that we think we have to use our professional judgment, me leaning on Mary, Mary working with Dr. Brinchero, using a day as well, staying in consultation with our teachers union to look at cases on a case-by-case basis. Now, I think the simplest way we can see it is if we see a particular outbreak in a classroom, we know that we would then say we have an additional mitigation strategy to use on a targeted basis, similar to what, Sean had shared around a short window of time. We know that that's an intervention that we would not use without consultation with the whole team, again, using on a short basis, and would not try to expand that past the group where we see the spread. So I think, again, when we're looking at different levels, we're going to be analyzing trends at certain age bands, paying a particular close attention to rise, paying attention to particular classrooms at the elementary level, watching for spread, looking for trends for potential teacher absences on teacher teams, maybe at the middle and high school level, looking at teams at the middle school level, looking at athletic teams or organizations at the high school level. So anytime there can be sort of a group that could potentially have higher spread in that sort of organization. So I can't give unfortunately, sort of a clear, framework for how we'll look at that outside of if we see evidence that it is spreading, then we will know that we have an additional mitigation strategy to sort of use at our disposal. And I know that that's sort of not ideal, but I appreciate the community's sort of understanding up front. That's a layer in a mitigation strategy we are comfortable using and we know could work to help us, again, keep students in school and learning.
I think that's really helpful to hear. I think, to Sean's point, I think that if we as a committee would like to stand together and say we'd like to try to take this step together working with the administration, I'd also like there to be an understanding from the community that we are going to make choices moving forward, that this might be an option that at points in time, and to trust in us to make collective decisions in the administration. He's saying that we might need to use masks sometimes.
And
that's what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Is that true?
Yes, correct. So we know that, again, and I appreciate everyone sort of, I'm being totally sort of upfront and transparent that there could be a scenario if we have particular cases at a classroom level where I think it would be smart for us to limit spread if we already see significant transmission to sort of avoid having a whole classroom out with potential spread, right? That's sort of us being upfront and forecasting potential scenarios. Again, we are voting tonight or recommending to repeal the mask mandate because we do not believe that right now a universal mask mandate across our schools is what's best for kids. We have heard sort of many families outline the negative impact of masking it's had on their kids. We hear that. So I don't think we are rushing to use sort of masks again and implement a mask mandate ASAP on our kids, right? I do think we would not, sort of in wanting everyone to keep our students in school, we would, if we decided we're not going to use masks at all as a potential, when we see an outbreak, I don't think we would be, living up to the commitment to trying to keep our kids in school and learning. So I think what I can say too is I would not implement or not feel comfortable implementing a district-wide mask mandate without sort of bringing that up and having a conversation with the committee. I don't think that that's something that I would feel comfortable in my control. I feel comfortable implementing that at a classroom level, at a grade band of, say, a first grade where there seems to be significant transmission at a particular athletic team. But I think outside of that, those are things that I would bring up to the committee. I just want to be able to have the ability to act responsively to what we're seeing on the ground level in classrooms and in schools.
Carl.
I'm guessing that the dissent a little bit was more of, and I'm in agreement with, I like the nimbleness of you being able, you and Mary and the people you consult with, to be nimble enough to make those determinations to try and keep that spread localized. I think if you go to the committee level, it creates another layer. It creates a time frame. It just takes, it's not necessary. That you guys need to be nimble enough. You've done this. You've been there. You're on the ground. You understand the schedules and all that. I'm completely comfortable with your assessment of what needs to be done, and Mary's, of course.
Responsibility, but trust. And he's earned it. So I think that's a I'm on the same page, just so everybody's on the same page, that I'm on the same page. But I saw one question out there.
I just had a really quick
And this is, I'm not going to open up for questions. This is the one and only question.
I know, it's just a clarifying question. Do we have any historical data on close contacts, when we had a close contact, and the spread ratio of that? Because I think it kind of all ties together, and historically.
The data may or may not be valid in the current circumstances, Alicia, because of the fact we're taking masks off now, right? So you're changing the equation.
Right, but I'm saying
That's
even
actually
with.
one of the problems with a lot of the studies, is the
Right.
equations aren't complete, right? So to forecast from past data that had a certain set of variables in it to a future data that doesn't have those same variables would be irresponsible.
Thank you.
Just want to add one thing too, is that these decisions that, forecasting potentials and hypotheticals, I hope the committee knows and the committee knows these are not decisions that I make in isolation in my office. I am not a public health expert, right? These are ones where I rely, Mary and I collaborate with ADAE, collaborate with, Dr. Brinchero, collaborate with others. So these are, again, these are not decisions that come just, from me. We will look at data and we will work collaboratively. And I think that's, the commitment that we can make to the committee and to the community tonight too.
Okay. So, time to pick up my son for robotics, but that's not going to happen. So I want to just thank the community for the way you engaged tonight. It was, highly positive, so I want to thank you for that. And there's been other places in other parts of the world, other parts of the country that got out of hand, but you guys shine through from a Reading perspective, so thank you for that. And I just want, from the community or from the committee perspective, this is one of those votes that requires a majority. So 4 of us have to agree. I'm hearing already that we're in a good place from that perspective, but this can't pass 3-3. It would not pass. 3-0, 3-2-1. It would not pass. You have to have 4. It has to have the full 4. So if anybody abstains, it would not pass. Right? That's the one there. So just from a technicality perspective, I want everybody to understand that. And passing, once again, means this policy would be repealed. It would be out of our policy manual effective 12/01, February 28th, 2022. So with that said, all in favor of the motion on the table, raise your hands. And all opposed? Passes 6-0. So, thank you, everybody. Please stay, because there's a lot of great stuff coming. For those of you who have kids to tuck in, go tuck in kids, as the case may be. All right, we are now moving to public comment. Public comment is the section of the agenda that covers anything that is not on the agenda. Is there anybody here who would like to participate in public comment? And seeing none. All right, so we'll move forward to the consent agenda, but I'll give the public a chance to step out.
Thank you, Mary.
You know how to clean out a room.
Yeah, we do have to know how to clear the room. Mary, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Have a wonderful evening,
Thank you,
Mary.
Mary. Good night.
I talked to you. Chief Buddy knows already.
Good, thanks.
Lieutenant Detective. All right. Now, moving forward to the consent agenda. Sean, do we have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Carla. All right, any discussion on the consent agenda? Any questions? All right, seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. All right, moving on to reports. Samantha, you ready?
Yeah. This is a very vastly shift to things very unrelated to masks.
That's okay. Lighten it up for us a little bit. Why don't you?
Please lighten it up.
All right, so first, as a lot of you may already know, over the weekend, the Drama Club presented 3 amazing shows of the Murder on the Orient Express, and it was entertaining and so very well done, and the hard work that the cast and crew put into the play was very evident, so congrats to them. And with more congrats in order, members of the wrestling team are going to states, and the gymnastics team have had an undefeated season, and they are going to sectionals, which is the meet right before states, which is amazing, so congrats to them. The jazz band also has their very first competition tonight, and they're likely at it right now, so we are hoping for another win for RMHS. Also, a little while back, the Culture Club celebrated the Chinese New Year, and it was a really great turnout, and they had everyone making firecrackers out of decorative paper and ribbon, and a variety of candy was distributed to everyone, and it was a great way to celebrate another culture and for everyone to have fun doing it, which was great. And also, today, the very first Mr. RMHS judge was confirmed, and it is physics teacher, Mr. Cabanas, and we are all very eagerly awaiting this show. It's been so long since we had this event properly done, and it's going to be a very iconic, and everyone is looking forward to it. But yeah, that's all I have for today.
Great, thank you, Samantha. Thank you. All right, seeing that Jen's not here, Sarah?
Hey everyone, I just have 2 items for you. I'm really looking forward to February vacation next week, and not perhaps for the same reasons as most of our staff and students, but next week we are launching our first February Vacation Academy, and we are so excited to be piloting this program. It's an opportunity. We have over 120 students who'll be attending, 15 staff members. Went out there and looked for some of our very best teachers to put them in front of our students. So we're excited to have a week where we are providing additional learning for some of our students who could use that, accelerating learning for other students. The plans that our teachers have put forth are engaging, so kids will be interested and excited, but they'll also be focused on important standards and outcomes for our students. So we'll be happy to report back to you how it goes. We will be taking some data to look at how students progress over those 4 days. And we'll, get feedback from our staff and parents as well. So very excited to be launching that. The other thing I wanted to fill you in on is another exciting initiative that we are launching. We recently reached out to our pre-K to grade 5 teachers to let them know that we are launching a literacy leadership team, and we are looking for volunteers to join that team. We're looking for educators at the elementary level that are passionate about literacy instruction, that want to learn and grow their practice. And that team is going to work together to come up with a really good common understanding about evidence-based literacy instruction, take a look at our current student trends and outcomes, look at the current materials and resources that our teachers have available to them, and then really work together to come up with some recommendations for next steps. That might involve recommendations in the area of professional development, looking at different or additional curriculum resources, and could also delve into the area of assessment as well. So it's a very exciting group. We already have had a number of educators express interest, and so we will be launching that leadership team at the beginning of March. So you'll be hearing more about that from me in the months to come.
Great, any questions? I have one just from, I know the answer, but the community might not. How does that literacy leadership team interplay with the Reading and Writing Committee that you are leading as well?
Yeah, so the Reading and Writing Committee is really a wonderful resource for our literacy leadership team. As I mentioned, the team will be looking at our current materials and deciding if there are changes or additional materials we want to bring in. And the Reading and Writing Group is really doing the legwork for us. They are out there identifying programs that we know are evidence-based, that have been proven by research to be effective with our kids. And so that committee is going to be able to hand us, the literacy leadership team, a really detailed list that's been vetted, that has all the information we would need to take a look at those resources as part of our internal curriculum review process for literacy. So,
yeah. Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay, moving on to Susan.
Yes, I have 2 items to report this evening as well. First, I'd like to welcome to the central office team a new employee, Caitlin Finnegan. Kate replaces Carrie Kearns in the Business and Finance office as the Finance and Business Analyst. Kate comes to us from the town of Stoneham, where she worked dual role between the municipal budget analyst and the school department director of finance. Her prior experience was in the municipality also of Stoneham, where she was the assistant town treasurer collector and has worked in accounts payable and payroll. We are absolutely delighted and so pleased that she's joined our team. The other item that I wanted to mention this evening is I'd like to thank a committee of 9 community and staff members who came together to work on developing an option for Reading Public Schools website. The charge of the committee was to discuss and define a vision for the Reading website, to identify components and content for a high-quality website focused on form and function, and lastly, to develop a responsive plan of action. The committee has met 3 times. We're meeting a 4th and final time, and we'll be presenting a set of recommendations to the leadership team. I'd like to name those 9 committee members. David Mastronardi participated on the committee, Jacqueline Lee, Alicia Williams, Lauren Bennett, Kathy Shedlack, Matt Darling, Meg Powers, Kathy Santilli, and Amy Greco, along with Julianne Carr. We are incredibly grateful and appreciate the wide perspective and expertise and experience that each brought to the committee. So we're looking forward to sharing with you more about our new recommendations for a website.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any questions? All right, Dr. Milczewski?
In just a little bit, I'll be presenting my entry findings from my first 8 months on the job, which is to share, kind of help the community to understand what I've learned about strengths, challenges, opportunities in our district, to help all of us develop a shared understanding of kind of where we are as a community. So I share that now at 9 o'clock just to drop a teaser for anyone who's thinking about staying up and extending their bedtime. So that's the only update. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to liaison and subcommittee. Sean?
Yeah, just one quick report on the FinCom. I wasn't able to attend, but the beauty of it being on YouTube is I was able to do some epic multitasking and watch while I was putting my kids to bed. So a few updates from FinCom. One is they dissolved their ARPA subcommittee given the creation of the Select Board Subcommittee, and also appointed members to that new Select Board Subcommittee. So Dr. Coram, who's here, Marianne Downing, and Joe McDonough will be the FinCom representatives on that committee. There was discussion about a new FinCom website and the direction that they'd like to go there. And then maybe the meatiest part of the discussion was Town Accountant Sharon Engstrom reviewing free cash projections for the next several years. And for me, the takeaway was that, while our free cash position remains very strong, Sharon has the unfortunate role of always being the one to highlight the doom and gloom scenarios. It's sort of, by her profession, I suppose, in some respect. And she pretty thoroughly detailed how, if we were to start being radically more aggressive in terms of the use of free cash in operating budgets, to support operating budgets, and some of the things like interest rates started to go the wrong way, our free cash position could change, dramatically pretty quickly. So, that's a very sort of important conversation to set context for some of the things that I think we're going to be talking about as we wrap the budget season here and approach town meeting and all that. And then finally, I don't know if Bob's still here, but both Bob and Fidel were in attendance, and they took the opportunity to recognize Bob for his many years of service, which, as folks know, I think started with his time on the FinCom. So that was certainly an appropriate agenda item for them as well. So,
great, thank you, Sean. Chuck?
Oh, okay. Mike? Yeah.
I'll come back to me. I always finish myself.
So I couldn't go to the FinCom. Last night, the Recreation Committee met for was a special meeting for the sole purpose of discussing, as everyone knows, I think it's April 15th, we start breaking ground on the new turf field. So we needed to come up with a solution for all the youth teams to be able to practice, because it's not expected to be done until sometime in August. But so we met about putting lights at Coolidge Middle School. There were residents there who spoke, and what we needed to come up with was a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. So I think we've had a very thoughtful, in that it listened to the residents and motion and passed a recommendation to put temporary lighting at Coolidge Middle School for mainly for the youth teams. Oh, and I met with Susan, Michelle, and Danielle earlier this week, and I really won't go into any detail because of the nature of it, but it was our first meeting to meet with the cafeteria workers union. And the only reason I really bring it up is I was in the room with those three, and wow, 3 stars, and it was just really enjoyable to work with you, and I look forward to, which I think will be a good process. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Chuck. Carla?
So the Board of Library Trustees met on Monday night. Board of Library Trustees rescinded the mask mandate for the library. Even though they're not requiring masks, they're still recommending them. They appointed Andrew Grimes as a representative for the ARPA subcommittee, and they filled the Equity and Social Justice Director position, and Sudeshna Chatterjee will begin in March.
Great, thank you very much. Aaron?
No report tonight.
Okay, Sarah?
Just a quick one. The Permanent Building Committee met on February 7th. I think the committee's all aware, but for the public, the Parker roof project that was slated for the summer is being delayed because of delays, shockingly, with getting materials. So mostly insulation and fasteners, if anybody was interested in that. So because of the tight time frame they're anticipating with getting the supplies and just the limited time frame of 8 weeks over the summer, they've decided to delay it a year, but facilities doesn't anticipate that this is an issue. The roof is in good enough shape to get us at least through another season.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Most of my subcommittee report would go to the next topic, which is the ARPA, but I do have one quick note. We received a request, so we'll put it on our agenda for the next March meeting. Some of you may know that there was a presentation to the select board a few weeks ago about a community garden at the Matera Cabin. So that was funded through an earmark, but that earmark apparently is going through DESI and not through the normal process. So apparently we now have to approve that, even though it has nothing to do with any of the schools. So that will be coming before us for a review and approval of that $10,000 come March 7th or 10th, whatever we agree our next meeting is going to be. So just minor little snafu in the way the money moves around.
If you can say without running afoul of any deliberation issues, was there a particular rationale for why that happened?
Doesn't seem like it.
Okay.
It just seems like the earmark as it went through the Senate and House and the state somehow ended up in DESI's coffers instead of whatever the normal coffers are.
Okay, thank you.
The main thing is we got the earmark.
Yeah, so we can choose to earmark it for something else if we want to. But let's not go there. I'm just kidding. Kathy's out there going, no, Tom. So, yes. So that's that. Okay, so just a quick note on agenda. Sean and I are just quickly trading notes on the side over here. We're going to do the next 2 items, and then we're going to take a brief, next 3 items, and then we're going to take a brief break so people can do a bio break or anything else that they need to do at that point in time. These next 2 should be the next 3 should be relatively quick as we go through them. So the item next is the Select Board ARPA Advisory Committee. We've heard already tonight how the Select Board, put in place their own advisory committee. They are the approving authority of the money anyway. Town meeting is not the approving authority, so they put in place their own committee. The committee is made up of 2 select board members, which will be Mark Doxer and Chris Haley. The 3 finance committee members that Sean reported on, 2 of us, and the 1 board of library trustees member that Carla reported on. My expectation and plan right now is to go forward with the same people we nominated before, or we put forward before, but John and I. But does anybody have any, big objections to that for the time being? Nope. Okay, so I'm appointing Sean and I to that committee from a school committee member perspective. I did talk briefly with Karen this morning or yesterday. It was this morning after the finance committee meeting. Now that the committee is formed, we can start working with Jackie at Town Hall to get that first meeting on the agenda quickly. So that should probably be happening in the next week or 2 to get that committee formed and get a chair, a vice chair, and all the actions put in place to move that forward. We are being asked to present at least the structure and some of the decision criteria by the April town meeting perspective, while not making any recommendations by that time of how to spend it, but at least what the committee is doing, what its charge is, and how it's structuring itself. So there's that. Okay?
Does that require a vote?
Would what require a vote?
We already
The
voted.
appointment?
Nope. Appointment does not require a vote. Okay, so moving on to the quarterly budget update. Susan, do you want to say anything, or?
Sure, I would just, I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. I'll just briefly state that the quarterly report covers the period between July 1st and the end of December. At this time, it looks as if we're projecting a balance of about $442,000. We've met and had collaborative conversations with our school leaders on ways in which we can shift those funds for use immediately to help create interventions for students in order to help them continue to gain momentum towards their learning, to provide additional social emotional supports, and to prepare ourselves for the future in terms of the purchase of materials and supplies and equipment. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have about the report.
So I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I was particularly pleased with what you just talked about, that there was a narrative in the report about how you, because there's been, it's most recently this year, we've gotten a lot of questions about why are we turning so much money back, and you know, you've laid out, or you've all laid out a plan to kind of redeploy those funds. So I appreciated that. I don't think we've seen that before in that report, so that was good information. So thank you.
Any others? You've answered my questions already, so thank you for that. All right, so we have a few motions as part of this process because there are some inter-account transfers we've got to work through. So, Sean, will you start us off?
Yeah. I move to approve the following budget, do you want to take them individually?
Let's do them all as one.
We've done all as one
Let's do them
before,
all
right?
as
Yeah. Move to approve the following budget transfers between cost centers as detailed in the packet. $50,000 from regular day to district-wide technology, $55,000 from special education to district-wide health services, and $64,680 from special education to regular day.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Did I get those right?
Correct.
All right, great.
Seconded by Chuck. Is there any discussion or any questions on any of the transfers? Okay, so all in favor? All opposed? And that passes 6-0. So thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
And we're moving on to the next agenda item, which is surplus materials disposal.
Yes, included in your report this evening is a recommendation to surplus projectors and smart boards that have reached their useful life that can no longer be repaired. The details of those pieces of equipment are outlined in the memo to school committee.
Okay.
Just one thing I'd like to add too is just the installation. Do you mind sharing a little bit about the installation process coming up this week?
Yes, during the next week, Tuesday through Friday, we'll be installing about 198 new smart boards. So these old projectors and smart boards are being removed. New equipment will be installed, K through 12, in all of our schools.
I see Andy in the back. You know, Andy and the team, Julian's team have been, prepared for that, and just like to thank them in advance for all of the work. And that's, that takes such a huge lift to kind of get all of that technology and up and ready for our kids, after next week. So thank you, Andy, and thank you to Julian. Thank you to your entire team in advance.
I'd also like to thank Andy because he's going to be the project manager next week, managing all these pieces as they come and go. So thank you, Andy.
I'm assuming we'll be working around the Vacation Academy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And just so the committee knows, this did come on our agenda a little bit late because we want to basically allow for the smart boards and projectors to be removed and not put into storage, so they don't have to be moved twice. So we're trying to be a little bit more efficient in time with the time of the staff as well as we do through that. So that's why we moved it up from an agenda perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, it did cause a few adjustments with Vacation Academy classroom setup. We did not think that the sound of drilling was conducive to accelerating learning. So there was a couple adjustments in place.
Okay. Now we'll take a motion, Sean.
I move per Mass General Laws, Chapter 30B, to declare as surplus property 174 smart boards and 168 projectors as detailed in the packet, and direct the school department to take appropriate steps to recycle and/or dispose of these items.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Carla. Any further conversation? All right, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. All right, we will take a 6-minute recess. It is 9:14. We will be back at 9:20. Don't be late. intro for this. So the committee has seen in the packet a little bit, but let me just briefly explain or put the request out there if everybody's on the same page. We are doing this a little bit differently than we have historically in the past. In particular, we want to give the committee time to process what they're hearing and then provide some written feedback, right? Throughout the year, we've heard a lot on goals 1, 2, 3. Basically, this is the first time we're hearing anything on goal 4. So we didn't want to rush it necessarily. We wanted to make sure that you could hear from Tom, process it. If you have questions you want to ask as well as part of clarification, because this essentially is the evidence that we're going to receive as part of the formative portion. And then prior to the next meeting, which I think we're going to move to 3-7 as a few of us, as we've been working through from a timing perspective, I would like to have each of you submit, and I didn't put this in the agenda on purpose because we were still working through the timing, each of you submit your written summary by 3/2, which is Wednesday. That will allow me to coalesce into a single written summary that will be very brief relatively. I'm asking you that you don't write more than 2 pages. I'm going to pull out key points from everybody and put the formative that is the official. And then that will be part of the agenda for 3-7 as well, to officially go through that and provide any other written or any other commentary people want to provide from the formative perspective. Okay? So 3-2, please provide me your written feedback so we can bring that together to coalesce. And Aaron, go ahead.
Will Tom see all of it, or he'll only see the?
Tom will see all of it.
Okay.
Just like the summative at the end of the year.
Okay.
So send it to both of us. That way he sees it at the same time. There's nothing for us to hide in that regard.
Okay.
The public, you don't send it to anybody else, because the public and you guys can't see it until it goes in the packet, right?
Yeah.
So, but that you know already, so just so everybody's on the same page.
So don't publish it in the newspaper.
Right. Or, well, I guess the public would see it then too.
Sorry, Al.
Okay, with that said, Dr. Milashevsky, you want to start us off here?
Perfect. Thank you, Tom, for framing that. So again, just a high-level overview of just the 4 goals that I outlined, back early this summer. First, goal 1, district improvement goal, was all around effective entry and direction setting. I'm going to speak to that a little bit tonight too, as I share sort of my report of entry findings. Goal 2 was around district improvement goal, was maintaining momentum during the transition. This was the piece of, it's not sufficient as a new leader just to sit back and learn about an organization. There's also require you to lead. I think we all know that in this context right now, we're not really given the opportunity to just sit back and learn, but also to lead. So that's goal number 2. Goal number 3 is my own participation in the superintendent induction program, which I've been participating in consistently throughout the year. At the summative, my superintendent coach, Chris McGrath, will share a little bit about just some of the things that we worked through together as a group. And then goal 4, which was the first 3 goals you probably remember were the goals that were recommended for new superintendents in Massachusetts. I decided with the support of the committee to add on a 4th goal around coaching, supporting, and developing school leaders. And we haven't really talked about that a ton this year as with the committee, so I wanted to share an update on, a deeper sort of update on why did we take this on as a goal, and then also sort of what has this looked like in practice thus far. And I've included in this pack, you'll see in the packet too, just more detail about what the goals are, some of the benchmarks and the key actions associated with each. So, Andy, do you mind just flipping over to the next presentation, which is supporting, coaching, developing leaders? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Andy. So again, the topic of goal 4, cultivating leadership, coaching, supporting, developing school leaders, ready public schools. I want to start by sharing just what I outlined as the goal for goal 4, which is design and implement a district strategy for coaching, supporting, and developing principal talent. As I will get into tonight, we selected this because this is something that, as we'll talk about tonight, is a high lever for sort of improving student outcomes, is to focus on the instructional leadership skill of principals. And also it's something that across the sector schools do not do super well. And I also think here in Reading there was a gap in something we could do better. So what were some of the things that we wanted to focus on this year? Our key actions first, wanted to ground ourselves in what does the research say about best practice in this area. So we were operating from a position grounded in research. 2, to complete a gap analysis of from what does this research say to where are we now with our own practice. 3, design some structures to close this gap that reflect these best practices and align to the Reading context. So, yes, we want things to be connected closely to research, but we also want them to align with what our principals are saying and sort of what the needs of our own community are as well. Step 4, onboard school leaders with the goals, rationale, and structures for the district approach in this. And then 5, monitor our progress and effectiveness to drive adjustments in strategy or approach. I want to emphasize this is not something that is a one-year sort of plan, right? This is something that if you kind of get a lay of the land across the ed sector, this is something that districts struggle with, right? There's not many districts that are out there that can boast that this is something that they really do well, and that's sort of aligned to a lot of the research. Yet the research says that this is a potentially high impact thing to invest in. So it is not feasible for us to sort of say that by the end of the year we're going to have a well-developed structure and system that's up and running that align to best practice and research. But you see, a lot of this is kind of getting some things in place, making adjustments, and I think teeing us up for the future on, using something that is going to, improve the instructional effectiveness of our principals. So a couple of times already I've shared that principal leadership really matters. Right? So there's 2 quotes up here that say, I think the first one, which is pretty obvious, it says, one group of researchers says, to date, we have not found a single case of a school improving its student achievement record in the absence of talented leadership. I think we all know that, right? Not a single case of improving. It's really hard to improve across a whole school without an effective leader. Right? We all know you can have pockets of sort of improvement, but to have improvement at scale across a school is difficult without strong instructional leadership. Now, I like this next one, which can quantify this a little bit. Highly effective principals raise the achievement of a typical student in their school by between 2 and 7 months of learning in a single school year. Ineffective principals lower achievement by the same amount. Good principal leadership really, really matters, right? Now, interestingly enough, this research has been around for a while. You see 2003, 2012. There was a piece of research that came out actually last spring from the Wallace Foundation called How Principals Affect Schools and Students in Schools, which basically said, we knew that principals always really mattered. Wow, we didn't realize even this impact is even more than what we had thought before. For those of you who love this work like I do, I would recommend checking this piece out. It is awesome. It has a ton of data around sort of how do they come to this conclusion. I think my favorite quote from that, which aligns to why are we investing in this strategy right now, is this. It is difficult to envision an investment in K-12 education with a higher ceiling on its potential return than improving school leadership. We do a lot to try to improve student outcomes. I mean, you've already heard some of the things we've talked about, increasing of staff, vacation academies, targeted tutoring. There's all different things, improving tier 1 instruction, curriculum materials. I mean, there's all different things that we do that all matter, right? From the wall, this piece of research will argue that, investing in the instructional leadership of our principals is sort of the best lever that we can use to improve student outcomes. Great. Yet, the challenge is that doesn't align with sort of the K-12 landscape, public ed landscape across our country. If you ask sort of public school districts sort of what's the lay of the land with principal prep, 3 of the 3 most common themes are as follows. 1, it's operations focus, which again, that means there are things that are not necessarily related to teaching and learning, right? Just keeping the school up and running, right? Being a building manager, which we know that used to be the expectations of a principal, manage the building. Now the role is shifted to actually improve teaching and learning. So 1, the challenge is operations focused. 2, just inconsistent. There are so many things on the plate of a principal, right? For those of you who have been principals, you know that your head is spinning with the things that happen sort of in the day-to-day work. Same thing with central office administrators. It is hard to carve out and invest the time to focus on development of instructional leadership skills. And then 3, another trap or another sort of just commonality is just one way. It's information sharing or giving from someone to the principal group. So central office sort of giving off information to principals without it sort of being a two-way collaboration. So that's sort of across the lay of the land from the sector. And I would say, you see similar trends, right, in Reading. And I guess to share that this is something that is not unique. This is not a challenge, again, that's unique to Reading. This is something I think all districts are sort of grappling with. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time tonight first grounding the committee and a little bit kind of what does the research say about the role of central office. So what's central office's role in improving sort of the principal capacity? 2, what are some of those specific structures that districts should be using to move the needle for principals? And what are some of those conditions that are required? And then 3, it would be great if we were leading this outside of a pandemic context, but this is work we're leading, change in times of challenge and crisis. So it's important that we also ground this sort of in the context that we're in. First, Central office role. Most simply, create and protect the time and space for this work. This sounds simple, right? If you read the research, it's simple. It says this is what you need to do, yet it is so hard to do in practice. We constantly are pulled in so many different directions, and it is hard to create and protect the time and space from a central office perspective and a principal's perspective. Now, two is what I think the big shift in practice is that it's actually creating structures where principals are, collaborating, requiring group problem solving, leveraging their expertise, individualizing support for them based off their skills, experience, background, and allowing time and space for reflection. None of this is one way, right? None of this is just information sharing. You see, this is principals working together to solve problems collaboratively. And then the last line is facilitating through a teaching and learning approach. My favorite text, as a district leader, is Meredith Honig and Rainey's text around supervising principals for effective leadership. This text talks about the importance of using a teaching and learning approach. This is basically the central office needs to facilitate, right, and model good practice, right, of what it looks like to lead, right, walking the walk. Giving principals sort of ownership of their own learning, having principals sort of help drive the work, modeling sort of thinking strategies as principals are working through things. All of those ideas of modeling are super important for sort of the central office's role. Now, structures condition. I'm going to talk about two structures that a lot of the research kind of comes around to say to be effective, but I want to say both of those structures will not be effective with what most research would say is around psychological safety, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that term, which is people need to be comfortable putting their neck out there and not fear that they're going to be, sort of punished for making a mistake. You have to create a space where principals are willing to be vulnerable and potentially, make sort of mistakes. That's really hard to build, right? And we say it, change happens at the speed of trust, right? You have to build trust, and that's like critical in these two, in sort of moving principles forward. Two structures that are critical or people think are sort of aligned in being good practice for supporting principals. One is principal PD, which is supporting principals in solving complex and challenging problems. So again, it's having principals actually try to solve problems, real problems, and infusing research and best practice into that problem-solving practice. Again, that sounds pretty straightforward. Two, also this individualized piece of allowing for one-to-one coaching. Knowing that our principals are at different places, need different things, have different goals in their school improvement plans. We need to provide job embedded, which means it doesn't just happen like after school, it actually happens on the fly with principals leading in the moment. Authentic, individualized learning opportunities. It's situated within an inquiry cycle, so that sort of means that principals are forced to go through a cycle where they are setting a goal, developing a plan to move forward in that area. We're constantly revisiting how they're doing towards those goals, measuring progress. And it occurs while principals are leading schools in real time. This should be happening walking through classrooms with principals. This should be happening spending time with principals in after-school staff meetings. This should happen with spending time observing principals in sort of, conversations with families, all different sort of settings that are in real time. And then crisis leadership, two things that stuck out to me as we're leading this year. I love this quote from a kind of a psychology term, holding, right? It's tempting to resort to command and control in a crisis, but it's leaders who hold instead that help us work through it. We as a central office have to create a space where we can help hold leaders, which means help them work through and think through the crisis, and then give them the space to think through the implications of that crisis. We are not commanding and telling them and directing them exactly what they need to do, but helping them, creating the space for them to work through the crisis and help them make sense of the crisis. And then lastly, again, leadership in an uncertain, fast-moving crisis means making oneself available to feel what it's like to be in another's shoes, to lead with empathy. I think more often, more important than ever, is important for us as a central office team to try to lead with empathy. Our principals are up against really big challenges this year. I think we look at just the needs of students. We look at just the staffing shortages. We look at just, still, the challenge of the pandemic. I mean, our principals are on the front lines to do those on a daily basis. So it is, us trying to demonstrate empathy and support them was sort of what they need and where they're at. So what does this kind of mean for Reading? So that's a lot of the research and just kind of the backbone of what we're trying to do. Again, we are very much in the beginning stages of trying to lead some of this work. I would be lying to you if I said we feel like already we're knocking it out of the park with this, right? There's things that we feel like we're making some traction in some of these areas, and then some things we're like, wow, we need to do better in this area. And I think that we're getting feedback from principals, and we're constantly trying to kind of improve. I'm going to walk through these four sort of what we think are the prongs that are going to define how we develop our principal talent, not only this year, but for years to come in the Reading Public Schools. The first, one-to-one coaching, which I just described a little bit about. I'll talk more detail about in a minute. 2, principal meetings, which I talked a little bit about just then. 3, curriculum meetings, which again, a structure for us just to focus on curriculum. And then 4, leadership meetings, which are our side chance for us just to talk about operations so it doesn't bleed into our instructional work. I'm going to go through these one at a time. First, leadership meeting structure. This is our time to talk about operations. So I think something that without fail we have done every day throughout the year thus far. Every Thursday, we meet with principals by grade level bands. We meet with the elementary principals, then with the middle school principals, then the high school principals to talk about non-teaching and learning items that are sort of just on their mind. It could be related to masking. It could be relating to staffing. It could be relating to, challenges with food supply. It could be related to some behavioral issues. It could be related to, whatever else, budget process, whatever else is sort of non-related to teaching and learning. This is the time and space for us to talk about it. If we do not carve out this time to do it, it will consume everything we do. I think if you ask principals who have, and my experience, if we don't set aside carved out time for operations, everything becomes about operations. Second piece is DLT and principal meetings. So this is every other week for 90 minutes. We meet with our entire group of principals and then sometimes with our entire group of our DLT leaders, which also includes some of our directors and coordinators. And also we're trying to start to move this with actually having time allocated for our APs. We realize that we haven't done a lot over the years to invest in our APs, and we think there's more that we need to do there as well. So what this looks like is this is related directly to teaching and learning. We have approached this, kind of tried a few different things this year. We've tried looking at data and then using this as a time to make sense of data with both MCAS data, attendance data. We've had people bring problems of practice through consultancy protocols. What we're working on now is we've divided up into groups of 4, and we are doing collaborative visits to all of the different schools. So I'm in a group with Joanne King, with Sarah Marchant, with Kelly Boswick, and Heather Leonard. And we are rotating through all of the respective schools with specific math look-for. So we were at Coolidge the other day. Heather provided us with 2 specific math look-fors that we were talking through to say, what sort of evidence do we see of implementation in these areas? And then giving Sarah some feedback on ways that she can continue to push her staff to move forward in these areas too. So I think that's an example of how we're in the moment, on the ground level, talking about teaching and learning, addressing problems of practice that they're seeing that are actually job embedded. Right? Again, a lot more work for us to do to kind of make this consistent and to make this as effective as it could be. One-to-one coaching, I think this is the part that we're still, doing a lot of feeling out. So all of our principals, what they did is they designed a individualized goal this year, a professional practice goal that they wanted to focus on. Looks different in all of our schools. It should relate to their SIP. And then what we do is we have monthly meetings where we sit down and it's we talk through sort of where are they at working towards this goal, what are some of the barriers, what are some of the ways that we can support them in moving forward with this goal. I'll give you one example. Earlier this year, Mr. Tracy set the goal of saying he wants to, by the end of the year, have a clear path forward for us to be able to implement some more innovative sort of designs at the high school level. So once a month, we've actually built it out from one-to-one coaching. Is meeting with Dr. Hardy and Lynna Williams. We meet collaboratively to kind of work through what are ways that we're actually going to be able to move this work forward. So we spend our time strategizing on how to move that work forward. We spend our time kind of talking about progress that we're making, opportunities, and then in between, Mr. Tracy and I are talking through sort of ways to move the needle forward with that. All of our principals are focusing on something different with that. I think this year we're facing, 2 challenges. One being the pandemic. It just makes it hard when we meet one-to-one to stay focused on this goal because there's so many other things that are coming up related to the pandemic, right? So that's one challenge for us. And we also realized that we kept intentionally our district goals very broad this year. We have a broad set of goals this year that are kind of all over the place, which kind of stretches us and doesn't really allow us to kind of group principles or kind of work or maximize our own effectiveness with them. So we're thinking about moving forward our need to kind of, closely tie some of those goals to a more defined sort of goal, district level goal. But again, we've carved out this time, and I think we are supporting our principals sort of one-on-one with what their, or in small groups with what their individual professional practice goals are. And then lastly, meetings led by Dr. Hardy, once a month around curriculum. For example, today we met with the department heads talking about dual enrollment. We know we've launched some dual enrollment opportunities here at the RMHS. We think there's an opportunity to expand in some really innovative and exciting ways, so we're kind of problem solving that with our department heads. We think that this is going to be critically important as we continue our math rollout of expanding different grades, as we talk through some of the things that I'm going to lay out later around pathways, as we look at our literacy practice, that we have this time also specifically carved out for curriculum meetings and content discussions. So again, overall, so far this year, I feel like we have set out a structure that aligns to research and best practice, that has allowed us to get these structures in place consistently. And I think now we're at the phase of trying to make sure we are using principal feedback to maximize the effectiveness of this. And I think that this is something that will continue to evolve. And I'm confident that sort of over the next few years that can be a real leader and model, I think, for other districts in this area. So I'll pause there and just open up to any questions. Sure.
I just have a comment. I love this, that, right now it's listed as a goal, but I look at it as part of the operation forever. Just that, this is constantly going on. It's not just part of this, but this is great. I mean, just to, there's nothing better than, I look at, your principals or your draft picks, and you got to develop them, right? And that's so important. And, we haven't been doing this, and this is great. So thank you.
And Chuck, I want to say one thing on that too, is that I should say earlier, we feel very fortunate to work with a really, really awesome group of principals. Like, we are working with principals who are some of the most dedicated, passionate, talented principals and who are eager to kind of partner and collaborate in this way. And I think people always say that the best people want to be coached and want to be supported and want to be part of it and collaborate. And I feel like this is not something to say that we have leaders who sort of just, are in a position where they need to be grown. This is a position where we feel like we're working with effective leaders who, if we can kind of continue to work as a group and work collaboratively, we can expand sort of their effectiveness and our effectiveness. So everyone, top down, no matter how effective you are, you can value from this type of collaboration and support. So thank you for raising that. Also giving me the chance to, I think, point out just the great principal cadre we have.
Sean.
So a few observations and one question. The observations, I've been waiting for this presentation because in my mind, this is one of the key reasons why we hired you, given your experience and your expertise in this space. And I'm thrilled to see it sort of come to fruition in this way, and your energy and enthusiasm about it is fantastic. Another observation is I'm reflecting back on when we all got together in the summer to do the equity statement and some of the goals work and visioning work and that sort of thing. One of the things that I was struck by in the moment then was the sort of natural inclination towards collaboration and building off of each other's ideas and feeding off each other that our principals had as a group, even the ones who were, brand new to the district at that point, essentially, right? And so hearing you talk about, sort of rotating groups going around and observing each other's buildings and, having look-fors and being able to collaborate in that way. And you talk about creating space by putting the operational stuff in a different meeting is all just, I'm thrilled to see, to see this coming to fruition. I think this is going to, make a huge, huge difference. Those, those figures you cited around, 2 to 7 months of advancement for, for effective leaders is really, really sort of valuable. My question was, you mentioned a couple times some of this work is rooted in like real world problem solving and group problem solving. I'm just curious, from a best practices perspective, how much of that is based on, sort of case studies that are real problem based versus taking our own sort of challenges and working through those in real time in groups and collaboratively? How does that look in your mind?
Great question. I think a lot of the researchers say you can do it in 3 primary ways. One, you can bring an outside problem and try to have them address an outside problem to get them out of their own context, right? We haven't done a lot of that work yet. We did a little bit of a case study, I know, collaboratively to start the year, but we haven't gone back to that model necessarily yet. 2, you can have principals propose a problem that they're dealing with and give them a protocol or a space to help each other grapple with that problem, right? 2, we've done some of that. 3, you can put principals in a space where they are like looking at instruction together and help them start to identify and surface issues and challenges and problems of practice together. So for example, when we were in schools together, someone made a comment the other day, that I noticed this in instruction. I think it will be more effective if we could like push to do better in this area. And I didn't even think of that. That's great. And that surfaced as a problem that one of their principal colleagues raised for one another. So I think we try to balance giving them the space to the problems that they know are on their mind, that they know exist, and also create the space for them to like uncover problems with each other too. So I think it's that sort of balance. And I think right now we're leaning a little bit heavier on having them uncover the problems together. Because I think that's going to help us develop a shared understanding of just somewhat like the unique, like what are some of the problems that we're seeing across the district or challenges.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Carla?
I'm sure when you do that, you also, besides creating a collaborative team, right? So principals don't feel just so alone in their own buildings. You help to bring out the excellence, right? And you help to uncover the discrepancies between different buildings as well. So I remember this from your interview, right? Like this is your thing, and it was impressive then, and it's even more impressive now. So, thanks.
I think just one other thing that, again, as I kind of processing this, and I love it, is by doing this, it's creating investment. The principals are becoming invested in the system, and it's not top-down management telling them how you're involving them in the process, and that's just, that keeps people around. That keeps good people around, and that's important. So I think this is great.
Okay, I have a few other things too. All of what they said, spot on. I've noticed as you're going through this, and this is a recurring theme that we're seeing more and more in the district, evidence base is driving what we're doing, right? We're seeing the studies, we're using the studies, we're taking that and then implementing things along that evidence base, whether it's this, whether it's reading, whether it's other things, we're going back to the evidence. And bringing that evidence out as part of it. So I just want to continue to thank you for that as well. As you're talking as well, I noticed I don't even know if you noticed you did it, but you're modeling that this is a growth process as well. We're not there yet. We're working it through. These are some of the words you're using as we go through that. And that modeling of growth is allowing that space for the principals to grow and be okay. You're creating that safe space. You're creating that trust. We don't always know the answer. We're going to work together to find the answer, right? And that kind of coaching and leading is making that available and bringing out the excellence, as Chuck was saying, or as Carla was saying. And then I guess the question I have as I'm looking through this, and as I think about some of it, and the answer might be in the principal meetings, but what I was wondering as you were laying out, we're meeting with elementary, we're meeting with middle, we're meeting with high school, is where is the vertical alignment happening, right? How are we making sure that the transition from 5th to 6th, the transition from 8th to 9th, how is that being worked into this process, or is that something different? It might be something completely different, but that alignment of what the entire system, or from pre-K, since you mentioned Ms. Bostwick as part of it too, pre-K to K, how is that working across the entire district as part of this process as well? Are you considering that, or is that one of the next steps or thought processes?
Great question. In the next presentation, you're going to hear a little bit of us identifying that as a gap for us currently, right? And I don't think yet that's been something that we have embedded in here yet, but it has been raised by principals as something that, is on the docket for us to think through. And I think it's come up in a couple of different ways. It's come up, I think, in curriculum. It's come up in sort of student opportunities. It's been come up in consistency across schools. Like I think there is a vertical alignment piece, but it's larger and sometimes just the opportunities to collaborate amongst the different levels too. So I hear you on that, and that's definitely a dilemma that we'll be talking a little bit more about later on with no clear answer.
And the other thing I see that I think a lot of the audience that's watching at home, since we don't have any left here, will recognize.
Oh, we have very esteemed guests.
We have wonderful guests that are still here, but conversely, versus the 50 people we had before, we're now down to 3. So is the fact that it's in-time coaching, right? It's You know, it's not something where you say, hey, I saw something a month ago that you did that the person's not even remembering anymore, or that is happening at your school, but it's like, okay, let's debrief right now. What did we see? How do we acknowledge it? How are we going to, what can we do here to push this, to push that? And that's a basic tenet of leadership coaching and people growth, is making sure that they see it in time. And so I'm so appreciative of the way you laid that out for us to understand as well. And I'm sure the principals are appreciative of it in time, so they can tie it back to what they're doing at that point in time as well. So I just want to thank you for that too. Erin?
I love this. And I will agree with everyone else that, something that really drew me to you as a candidate was your experience in building leaders. And I thought that was something that could be very valuable for our district. And I agree with Chuck that, you hope that investment keeps people in the district. But what I love about this is it's all with this goal of excellence in leadership, because we know the outcome that have for student. So even for a principal getting feedback, I feel like it takes some of the, I don't know, sometimes there's negative connotations, right, in being observed, or sometimes there's more anxiety around that, but there's all this investment of, like, we are building excellent leaders. You're empowering our leaders. You're empowering them to, own their buildings and own their spaces. You're creating this team mentality among the leadership in the district. I just think it's awesome, so.
Great. Okay. I think that's the end of this topic. Yep. Right? Are we ready to move on now to the next one, or is there something you want to sum up?
I'd just like to thank you for the feedback. I look forward to at the summative sharing out just some of the impact of what this has had. Again, I feel excited that we've been able to get some things in place that I think align to best practice, but we are a long way away from, I think, really maximizing the impact of this. And there's a lot more in the growth area than there is in sort of the positive from my mind in this. There's a lot of area for us to grow and improve, and we're definitely, using principal feedback to continue to drive that. So thank you for the feedback. We are equally excited about what we're doing here, but also think there's a long way for us to go to maximize the impact as well. And emphasize, the community knows this is fun, exciting, enjoyable work when you're working with really high-performing and effective leaders. So Andy, I think we can switch.
Andy's the DJ back there.
Andy's the DJ. A little bit of music, Andy. A little.
Yeah.
All right, so, and I feel like there's a lot of me talking, but I think there's no way.
It's that time, Tom.
It's that time. It's that time.
Let Sarah talk here in a little bit.
Sarah will be talking too, but this is a lot of me right now. But so I'm going to share a report on my entry findings tonight, which, again, to give a little bit of context, as I entered into the district, I provided the community with a structured entry plan. I thought that it was important for me to be open, transparent, thoughtful, and structured with how I was going to plan to enter into the district. That transition really started last February when I was named the superintendent, all the way sort of up to the end of this school year, where we're going to revise our district strategic plan. My goal for tonight is to share out just what are some of the things that I've learned from my first 8 months on the job. Talk about all the ways that I've gathered all the information, things that I've learned. Share out what I've learned about strengths. Share out what I've learned about challenges and about opportunities. And then also for us as a community to have a shared understanding of sort of where we stand. I'm not going to dive into the specifics of, the root causes or the challenges of some of the certain challenges. That's something that we'll make sense of down the line. My goal tonight is just to elevate some of the things that, I've learned. The second piece is that there is no solutions attached to what we're going to see tonight. After I present this, I'm going to share with the community a more in-depth written document that outlines these entry findings in more detail within the next week or two, which can then also set the stage for us to use this to either, create a new strategic plan or to revise the current district strategic plan. So the goal is for us to kind of use this data to then move forward and chart a path out for us collectively. So entry activities, you probably, again, I've talked about this many times at different stakeholders. I've tried to meet as many people as I could over since June, or actually last February, whether I'm meeting one-on-one in small groups, at events, through meet and greet, staff office hours, full-day school visits, staff listening sessions, entry interviews, ongoing school and classroom visits, attendance school community events. I and we have really tried to learn about the community the best that we could, because I think it's important for the district leadership to understand the community through the eyes of a lot of different stakeholders if we are to effectively lead. And I also think it's important for us to share back out what we've learned from a variety of stakeholders, again, to create a shared understanding. We've tried to learn through all of these. The ones that I'm going to emphasize the most, that are most important to me, is the time we've spent in classrooms. So yes, we did full-day school visits at every school, but I think we all try to hold ourselves accountable to spending a lot of our time in schools, with students, with staff, learning about what's happening. In the time that I've spent with structured entry interviews, I see some members of the audience. I think I've entry interviewed members of the audience. I think all the committee members here. I've asked some of these questions. What are our district's core strengths and how do you know? We want to be able to know this so we can use this information to build on these strengths. There are some really unique strengths in Reading that we could build on to even, move our district forward. 2, wanting to know the biggest challenges facing our district, just 1 to 2 to prioritize, and how can we go about addressing them. I wanted to hear from people, what is it you see facing our biggest challenges facing us, and then what are your ideas? Like, how do we go about addressing them? And people had all sorts of different creative ideas response. 3, imagine 5 years from now, RPS is regarded as one of the top districts in both our state or country. I don't care how you define the best. We will figure that out, right? This is not to say to already start to tell people how they should define what the best is. Whatever in your mind the best is, the best for your child. How do we get there? This question is designed to get people's creative thinking. Like, what are the path forward for us? And then what do you need from me as a leader right now? Sometimes when you ask people, what do you need from me most right now, you can get a pulse into sort of the context and what the culture, the morale, the feeling of the organization is. I asked these structured questions through a variety of interviews, and I also just, again, in many informal conversations, was able to pick up questions in these areas. Met with all different stakeholders, which I've outlined in my entry plan. You'll see just, again, trying to get the feedback from a variety of different stakeholders in a lot of different settings. Also want to emphasize this work for me is not done, right? I am still learning, still meeting new people every day, still get emails from people say, hey, I haven't reached out yet, but I'd love to meet with you. Organizations, for example, I'm still meeting with the clergy organization next month. I haven't had a chance to connect with them yet. There's still some things that are coming up that are in place, but this is an ongoing process to learn about the community. So I'm going to move into talking a little bit about just what have I learned about the district, core strengths, opportunities, but I'd also like to kind of bring into how does this fit with sort of the work that Sarah's done too. So as you know, Dr. Sarah Hardy is new to the district in her role as well. She has also been leading her own entry plan at the same time. Her entry plan has been more focused specifically on teaching and learning. Your mind is a little bit more broad. So tonight we've merged our 2 presentations to kind of talk about all of them together. You're going to hear from both of us speaking. And then I am going to put all of this into my written document. Sarah's also going to have sort of an additional supplement that's going to sort of kind of dive more deeply into the teaching and learning pieces too. All right, so core strengths. There are many strengths across this district. I would say that this is a district that is operating from a position of strength. I believed that when I started learning about the district last December. I believed that when I kind of came on and learned more about the district from February to July. And I believe that more now than ever I have that this is a district operating from a position of strength, right? This is a district that the community should feel really, really proud about. This is a district that families should feel excited about sending their kids to, right? So we share all of that to say, I'm going to highlight, I think, some of the things that I think make Reading RPS really unique. Starting with our staff, diving into our community, talking about communication, extracurricular opportunities, and the student experience. These are all things that not only have I observed, but have also been shared through stakeholder interviews. There should be nothing up here that should come as a surprise to people. I am blown away by just how deeply this community understands where we are in RPS. I will share some of the opportunities and challenges. These are things that have already been pointed out by teachers, parents alike, right? So I would be shocked if there's something up here that says, wow, I didn't know that or I didn't think about that. And I think that just is a testament to how sort of well people know the community. This is a long list of quotes. I should have had them come in one at a time that outline what parents and teachers feel about the staff in the district. And I will summarize here. Chuck said it earlier, our biggest asset is our staff. And in the overwhelming biggest piece of feedback we heard time and time again was this is a really special staff, paraprofessionals, teachers, principals, cafeteria workers, secretaries, custodians, you name anyone, tutors, anyone who is working in our building, first of all, deeply cares about kids. And I see that. When I'm in buildings, and we are in buildings, we see staff who really cares about kids, right? As a whole, collectively, at all levels of the organization. You see staff who work super hard. Someone put a quote in here, you'll see that the parking lot in the morning is always filled with staff. Late at night, on the weekends, staff works incredibly hard. And I think it's a staff that takes great pride in their work too, takes their role of teaching and educators with great professionalism and great respect and great, holds the role in high esteem. I can't say enough great things about the RPS staff, and I also, from my own lived experience, but I also just want to emphasize too, this is what I heard time and time again from the community. So this is a community that I think knows the value that we have and the amazing staff that we have in front of our students every day. Community. This is also a community that feels that there is such a strong, special feeling about RPS and about Reading District. I remember when I was interviewing, I had a friend and colleague who lives in Reading, who says, and he says, the thing that makes Reading different is that Reading, you walk around, everyone wears their Reading stuff. Like everyone feels this Reading pride. You can't go anywhere without rocket gear. And I see the bumper stickers everywhere. There's just this special sense of pride in the community. And I think I see it manifested in two ways of community. One, there's a great pride at the school level. You go into each school, they feel uniquely proud about what their own school identity is and what makes that school unique. And that all merges into like an identity, though, of a Reading that is a town and a community that is passionate about education. Someone alludes to the override right here. But it's more than that. Families who want to be deeply engaged. People who talk positively about education. The whole community who knows that or feels that this is one of the hallmarks of our community, one of the foundations of our community is a strong public school district. So this is something that community stakeholders feel really strongly, that something that makes RPS really special is this feeling of community at the school and town level. Third, communication. So 3 levels of communication. Communication between the principal, actually I start with this, the teacher and the families. Communication between the principal and the families, both proactively to get information out and also in the moment. So I'll read one of these quotes. It says here, the first one, clear communication, attention to student need is a strength. Again, so much of this communication came down to like individual students. People feel like their teachers and their staff members respond to individual student needs. We receive regular updates from the district that are clear and transparent. Our children's principal is a fantastic communicator. I know what's going on at the school each week and beyond, and if I forget, I know where to look. I'm continually impressed with communication from our children's teacher, principal's weekly newsletter, and email communication from our district. And one strength is communication between teachers and parents. I always receive prompt responses to emails, and whenever requested a meeting, it is set up as soon as possible. The part that's most encouraging to me is this piece that it connects to individual students. Right? I think a lot of school communities can boast out that principals get information out, teachers get information out, but it's this idea that it connects to individual students to me that makes it show that connects back to that deep care and passion and knowledge of the students that our staff have. I love this one. As someone who I believe a major piece that drew me to Reading was this belief in the whole child and this a community that invests deeply in extracurricular activities. It is not just academics that defines RPS. You see the quotes here, the extracurricular offerings in Reading are at the core of my child's educational experience. They have been instrumental in the growth and development of my child. Reading boasts the absolute best extracurriculars, arts, athletics, music, clubs. There's something for everyone and they all perform at a high level. The amazing extracurricular activities set the Reading Public Schools apart from other schools, both public and private. I believe that the extracurricular activities absolutely set this district apart from other competitors. There was a text that came out that Jal Mehta recently wrote about the American high school, which is like basically about reimagining high school. And I like his opening chapter, which he talks about kids kind of sit bored throughout their school day. Then the bell rings at 2:30. Then they come to life with like their extracurricular activities. Didn't have a positive experience in RPS. I don't know if you remember saying that, if a paraphrase earlier this summer. But that I feel is generally family through the current district strategic plan, which the previous administration put together. They organized 3 strategic objectives. 1, redesigning school, so thinking about school differently in the pandemic context. B, coherent. Our school committee collaborated with our group of principals, our directors, our coordinators, our RTA, executive board to come up with a statement of what we believe in inequity. We believe that we need to be fiercely committed to the success of every single student. Truly a definition of equity, and that's a definition of excellence, right? So I'll get into a little bit more of the specifics on that. So talking through now opportunities. These are not all things that we're not doing well, masked as sort of opportunities, right? There are some things in here that we need to do to improve, and there are also things here that are genuine opportunities ahead as we move forward. All under redesigning school. First of all, pandemic impact. I mean, I think if you listen to people tonight, we've heard, those are just a few of the stories of the way that pandemic has impacted our kids. I do not need to go into great detail tonight to talk about the way that pandemic has impacted our students academically. We know what the interruptions have done, the gaps they have caused in learning for our students. Social and emotionally, I mean, we have all lived this, I think, with our own children, hearing the experiences of others. I'm living this now as a parent. The pandemic has had a tremendous impact on my children. So this is something I feel as both a parent and as an educator. We need to think about school differently, about how are we going to close gaps and accelerate learning, and how are we going to meet the increased social and emotional needs of our students. We included a couple of slides, which Erica McNamara did a wonderful job on these and presented earlier in the year, just showing sort of a pandemic classroom. This is actually from sort of the spring of 2021. I would argue sort of the trends have probably not moved in a positive direction, showing the amount of students that just feel like at times their mental health was not good, or was, some of the time or most of the time. And Erica also outlined some of the specific things that our students are struggling with, right? Feelings of fear, sadness, anger, worry, changes in appetite, energy, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, physical reactions such as headache, body pains. I mean, these are just a few of the things that I think students have struggled with before, yes, but Erica, I think, did a great job talking through that night that the pandemic has really just amplified these needs. So as I share that, I think that our community has a unique opportunity to think about how are we structuring school, right, to change, to be in alignment with some of these academic needs and social emotional needs. That's one piece. Second piece is I've heard a lot about the sort of the human resource frame of what we can do as an opportunity for improvement under three areas. Recruitment. I have heard a lot from staff, I have heard a lot from families, and I've heard a lot from students that we need to recruit a staff that reflects the diversity of our students, whether we look at that racially, linguistically, ethnically. Some of our elementary staff have talked about even having gender, sort of more male staff at our elementary levels. I wanted to point out quickly about, racially, we are in a staff, of 533, 521.2 FTE identify as white, which is about 98% in a district that's about 86% white, right? So I think we realize that we have some work to do to increase the racial diversity of our staff and other forms of diversity. And that's something that's critical for us, again, in supporting our students to see themselves reflected in the staff that we have. Second piece of staffing comes around retention. This is the data from 2020. You'll see that on the bottom, let's see down there on the bottom row, teachers. First district, there's a district column and a state column. You'll see that in 2020, we retained 86% of our staff, which the state average is right around 88.4. So I'd like to pause there for a second and say we're right around state averages, but I've heard a couple of things, right? I have heard from families that the impact of losing good staff is tremendous on their students' experience, and I've heard the same from students. And I've also heard from staff just saying, can we look at some of the root causes of why sort of our staff retention rates are around this rate? Is it due to pay? Is it due to workload? Is it due to other issues that we're not aware about? Is it just ways that we may not be as competitive with some of the other, sort of things that other districts may offer? What is it, right? So I don't think we have the answers here, but I think that we've heard from, the community that we have an obligation to, in order to improve, to find ways that, we can better retain sort of our staff and figure out what are some of those drivers in that. Now, out of HR, I see all the lights come up. Out of HR, there is also a huge part of HR is developing, there's not only recruiting, retaining, but is also developing the staff that we have. This is a huge one that has come up time and time again from teachers. I'm going to turn over a little bit to Sarah on this point too, because this is one that also funnels into our next part about coherent instructional systems.
Yeah, great, thank you. So, talking about PD with principals, with staff has been an important focus for me. thus far this year, and honestly living it, right? Starting to develop professional development for our staff with our leaders. And so, it was great to see that there's a lot of high-quality professional development that has been put in place, especially in the areas of new curricular tools that are being implemented. Really great structured PD has been put in place. We also have examples of some professional learning that's ongoing that involves teacher choice and is really related to the work in front of them each day. PD also really shifted in Reading with the pandemic in really great ways. There was wonderful training put in place to allow teachers to access the new technology tools they needed to access to learn about the new methods of teaching. And so as we come out of that part of the pandemic into this new phase, there's new learning, there's new growth in professional development that needs to happen. What we're hearing from our teachers is that they really want a multi-year plan, professional development plan that addresses how we're going to move their professional learning forward. And to move their professional learning forward, what we're hearing from them is that they want professional development for the curricular tools and materials that we put in place, not just when they're first implemented, but as they continue to use those materials with students to be able to determine their effectiveness and to grow their practice. The other thing we've heard too is that teachers want to have a voice and be involved in the process of how professional development is rolled out. And we think that that's important too. So there is one really specific area that's come up too around professional development that I want to mention tonight. Repeatedly, we've heard that we need to be looking at how we're supporting our new staff. So looking at mentoring and induction. And I think this speaks really well to what Dr. Milichewski is talking about. If we want to retain staff, we need to ensure that when they come on board, we have plans in place for how to get them up and running in the curriculum that they're going to be teaching, in the supports that are in place in our district, and understanding the culture of our district. So that was one particular area that we've identified.
Other pieces about redesigning school, I was, again, encouraged by the alignment of things that I saw of what I heard from families, what I heard from teachers and staff, and also from what I sort of observed. Several things of points of access that we need to think through as a district that are challenges right now for us and also opportunities. One, full-day kindergarten. We've talked about how we're one of 23 districts that still charges for kindergarten, an opportunity for us to increase access for our youngest learners. Two, enrichment for elementary and middle school. I just spoke about the wonderful extracurricular offerings sort of at the high school level. A lot of families, the elementary school particularly, some at the middle school say, hey, are there ways for us to embed more musical, sort of musical instruments at younger ages? Is there a way for us to embed foreign language, more hands-on STEM opportunities sort of in the structure and confines of the day-to-day schedule? We've heard a lot from high school staff. We've heard a lot from high school students around designing coursework and pathways that are aligned to their student interests. This is potentially vocational opportunity, hands-on vocational opportunities. We've heard a lot about that. Computer science, biomed, engineering, fields that students are having a lot of interest. Can we ensure that we have coursework and pathways that are aligned in those areas? We've heard also a lot of conversation about tracks and leveling, right? I know that there's a lot of difference in opinions on sort of the decision years ago to sort of, reduce tracks at the high school. I have heard a lot from both staff and families with wanting us to at least talk about and have conversations about how do we, how is the structures that we have by tracks or levels push us to have both equity and excellence for our students. Innovations in high school, again, hearing from a lot of families, a lot of staff of just the opportunity for us to expand offerings around dual enrollment, early college that align to what a lot of other innovative high schools are doing. Math pathways, grades 6 to 12. I'm going to pause on this one for a minute because this is something that was a huge thing that has come up time and time again. Heard this from administrators, I heard this from teachers, I heard this from students, and I heard this from families, that we need to think through sort of what is the trajectory of a student in middle school of how they get to the highest level of math, and are there barriers that are in place that limit their ability to hit the highest level of math if they want to go that high, right? If they want to go to Calc AB or Calculus BC, are there ways for them to get there if they don't take certain courses, right, in middle school, also without having to double up, right? So I think the community is interesting for us to explore the possibility of creating pathways for kids to get at that same level through multiple entry points. And lastly, our access in our METCO program. I think, Mr. Martin has been here several times to speak some of the work he's doing. I think we'd just like to, offer that we've heard from a lot of our Boston resident families and also METCO headquarters that we have opportunities to expand access. One of those big ones has been late buses, right? And I know we're making some headway in that area now. We think something to ensure that our Boston resident students have the same access to extracurricular offerings, play dates, opportunities to hang out with friends, get academic tutoring. We need to make sure that they have a late bus provided on a consistent basis. I'm excited to say that that's something we feel like we have in place, but there's also other things that we're hearing that we can do to expand access and opportunity within our METCO program as well. And then the last piece under the redesigning school bucket, time on learning. We have heard teachers at every level of the organization say, we would like to look at our schedule. High school has already taken on some of that work, has already assembled a scheduling team. They're partnering with the district management group as a consultant also to kind of support this work. But to look at how do they create a schedule that's aligned to best practice and ensures that students are able to select all of the courses that they actually want throughout the day without having sort of some structural barriers in place because of the schedule. Middle school level, two things that we've heard from teachers. One, we were at Coolidge the other day and a few math teachers said to us, we need more than 47 minutes of math, right? We think that 47 minutes of math is probably not enough to move the needle, but it's challenging, right? Because we know that there's trade-offs, right? So heard that from staff, and I've also heard from, in a meeting the other day with our teachers union sharing that time for tier 2 support continues to be a challenge, right? At both the middle and elementary school schedule. Shifting to elementary, we've had conversations with several staff members about elementary half days. We know I've tried to learn what's the history of this half day? I see someone laughing. What's the purpose of this half day? How is it best for our students and staff? And I've already heard teachers say, hey, I have some ideas of ways we could explore this that's a win for both teachers and students. A win for teachers in the ways that we could actually get sort of professional learning, collaborative planning time to grow our practice. And maybe it's a time to provide maybe some of those enrichment opportunities to expand learning in some of the STEM areas, other things that we know provide more tier 2 supports. So I don't think that we sort of are in a position yet to be able to figure out what we're going to do about it, but I want to share that I think our schools are all thinking about time really matters in our pandemic context, so we have to think critically about how we're using it. And then lastly, you've heard a little bit about Vacation Academy. There is an opportunity for us to use vacation, summer, before and after school time more creatively in more targeted ways to support our students to grow. We've heard from a lot of our community partners as well. A lot of our community partners have reached out to say, hey, guess what? We have some ideas of how we could work with you, of ways that we could support our students. I know Dr. Hardy's been meeting a lot with some of our community partners to do some innovative things in this area. But if we don't think creatively around time, we're not utilizing all the things at our disposal to address some of those challenges in sort of social and emotional academic needs that we're seeing. Shifting to coherent instructional systems. Again, I'm doing my best to consolidate this as also not Tom wanting to sort of cut down on content. I know we're getting late too. One thing that I've heard, one big piece of feedback from the community is that we have a chance to sort of raise the academic bar. I think we need to raise the bar and sort of improve student outcomes. Now, I think as I've heard that, it's made me think of two things. It's made me think of first, what do people mean when they say raise the academic bar? I know we've heard sort of people have had different definitions of that. And also, what does it look like to us to measure our success in that area? I'm excited and encouraged by some of the work that the Portrait of the Graduate has done to say, here's what we're defining what we want our graduate to look like. I think there's now that next layer to say, well, what are some of the metrics that we're going to use to measure our success in improving academic outcomes? I agree that this is an opportunity for us to sort of improve. And again, I've heard this from teachers, staff, family, and students. I want to dive quickly into some of the data. Again, given the time, I'm not going to go too far into this. This is going to be shared in the updated packet. You'll see here, this is this is MCAS data 2021. Reading in comparison with a lot of the DART, the school's DART data, which is basically school districts that DESE has identified as similar districts based on size and special populations, which they identify as economically disadvantaged students with disabilities, ELs. It also up here then shows the percent meeting or exceeding expectations in grades 3 through 10, and then growth average SDP, which is student growth percentile. The summary of this is, right now we are a district that is having solid outcomes. But in comparison to the DART districts, right, we are not where we could be in sort of student achievement, right? We have more work to do if we want to be one of the higher performing districts, right? As you see in here right now, we are not necessarily one of the higher performing districts according to this piece of data, right? We are, there's a lot of things that are looking, that we are in the middle of the pack. There is room for improvement, and I think that that's what our families have shared. Diving deeper, Dr. Hardy kind of outlined in the beginning of the year a lot of our MCAS data. If you break our data down by subgroups, you see here on the left is our ELA data 3 through 8, the right is our math data 3 through 8. You see when we break down, there are certain groups of students who are not having as much success academically in our system, right? You break it down economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, high needs, EL, or if you break it down by race, right? We realize that there's some gaps in performance that we not only need to raise the bar for all, but we also realize that we need to pay particular attention to groups that are not having as much success in our system right now. Similar trends hold in grade 10 math and ELA. These are similar trends when we look across our advanced course completion, so students completing our AP courses, breaking that down by race, breaking that down by some other demographic data. And I'm not going to get into that necessarily right now. But again, the point I want to make, which I think goes along with what I've heard from the community, is that we need to improve academic outcomes for all of our students, and we need to pay particular attention to certain groups of students and increase outcomes in those areas. Two pieces that have come up in those conversations that I think are unique that I wanted to raise to the group. One is attendance. If we actually look at our attendance data on the surface, we had 97% attendance on a daily average in 2020, 2021. That sounds great. But then we break it down a little bit more. If you look in this, the column where it says absent 10 or more days, which is the third from the left, you see that, for example, in that year, 40.4% of our economically disadvantaged students were absent 10 or more days. And actually 25% of them were chronically absent, which is absent more than 10, was at 10, more than 10% of the days, so more than 18 days. So there's an opportunity for us there's some connection here between sort of attendance and academic outcomes. That's not the whole sort of solution to the puzzle, but we did want to raise awareness to the community that we have some work to do to figure out sort of why do we have some of this attendance data in the way that we do, and what are some of the ways that we can get our students in school consistently, right, because we know that that really matters in student outcomes. Now, another thing that I've heard from the community a lot is just sort of, is funding, right? And what's the tie between funding and academic outcomes? So I put up here for charts around, on the left, communities that FinCom has identified as similar communities to Reading. In the middle, Middlesex League communities, and to the right, the DESE DART communities that I just identified in the other comparison. Reading is very different than a lot of these communities. Reading is very unique. I think a lot of people speak to particularly sort of the low corporate tax base, right? I wanted to put this out there because I had a lot of stakeholders ask, right, what does it look like in terms of what our community investment is, right? So I think there is a lot that we can do with what we already have, right? And I think we were really excited about the investment that we were able to put in place our district this year in our budget that's going to move the needle for kids. And I also think, right, there is conversations about, if we were to able to add more somehow to our district, would that have an impact on student achievement, right? I would like to think the answer is yes as well. But as part of this conversation about academic outcomes, we know that we have a lot to do around improving teaching and learning, right? But also there are other parts that are sort of connected to this too, one of which being attendance, which is important. Also, another one around sort of per pupil comparisons. Again, much more conversations on this sort of, to come as we move forward. A couple other things around raising the academic bar. I've heard a lot from families saying, hey, can we do more to raise outcomes for, for some of our higher achieving learners and giving them more opportunities to grow, right? The need to create consistency across schools, right? While there's things that should be able to make schools unique due to, with a school identity, there's also things that are important to be able to say, my child's going to get regardless of which school they go to, around curriculum, around assessments, other core pieces. And then also an opportunity to celebrate student success. I've heard from a lot of families to say it's important to celebrate all of the wonderful accomplishments that our students have in all of different areas. And academic success needs to be one of those, right? That needs to be at the forefront of what we're doing. We need to celebrate when our students do well academically. We need to celebrate when our schools do well academically, right? There is a lot that we celebrate, and that's great, right? And academics needs to be one of those, right, as well. It needs to be at the forefront. So again, under the idea of coherent instructional systems, also other parts that we feel are critical in this that we say, these are opportunities for us as we try to improve for us to move the district forward. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Hardy, who's going to dive into, again, a little bit of an overview of a few of these categories related to coherent instructional systems.
Yeah, excellent, great. So part of my entry plan, in addition to lots of interviews, school visits, is also a bit of a document review, looking at what's in place in the district, and particularly in the area of curriculum. There's a lot to look at to understand the systems in place. So I was able to review, we have curriculum guides in place for just about every content area, grades K through 12, that outline the overview of our curriculum. There are more detailed instructional plans that are in place as well. How those are stored, gathered, is a little bit different depending upon the level, and then even a little bit different at the high school depending upon the department. In looking at the curricular tools that we have in place, I've discovered that we use a variety of materials, including district-approved curriculum. We also have a lot of teacher-created materials. As we've talked about a great deal tonight, we have amazing teachers, teachers that really understand their practice, understand the content that they're teaching, and work very hard each day to create materials that are engaging to our students and that get our students thinking, working independently. And really, depending on the grade level and the content area, I did see that there's varying use of district-adopted materials versus teacher-created materials. One of the strengths that I've come across in the area of curriculum is that in the recent adoptions of curricular tools, a really great process has been followed to ensure that those materials are evidence-based. So I think that that's a position of strength for us to work off of as we move ahead in our continuous updates of curriculum. I think that it would give us the ability to clearly identify the expectations around curricular decisions. This is something that I've heard repeatedly from our building principals and from our curriculum leaders, that we need to clearly articulate which decisions are teacher-based, principal-based, and district-based in regards to the materials that teachers are using. In looking at how our curriculum is implemented, so the practices that our teachers use, we were continually impressed with what we saw in our classrooms, really skillful implementation of curriculum by our teachers. And what our stakeholders, though, have told us that we need to do better is to find ways to make sure that these outstanding practices are happening systematically across our schools, across levels. One of the ways that we can help that happen is by looking at the way that we review curriculum. So leaders have shared that the curriculum review process to date has been triggered by a number of things. It might be a new framework coming out, a license that's expiring, or availability of funds, just to name a few. And recently there was an adoption of math curricular materials. As you well know, grades K to 8, and just before that, some of our upper, middle school, and into high school materials. You got a chance to see from our students tonight, just how encouraging it is when a great curriculum review process happens and we put something in place that is evidence-based and good for our students. But in many of the data sets that we've reviewed, we believe that there are further areas in our curriculum that would benefit from review. One area I'll just highlight is literacy, especially early literacy materials. There's a couple of reasons we've identified that as an area that's ripe to be looked at. As we've reviewed our student data, as you've seen, we've seen that not all of our kids are being successful in literacy, and so that is an alert to us to look a little bit more deeply at that. Additionally, there was a report that was published earlier, last year actually, the end of last year, by Ed Reports of one of our current curriculum tools that pointed to it not being effective. So we need to take a closer look at that. And then one of the other things that we've heard consistently from our teachers at the elementary level as well is that they have a variety of curricular tools in literacy that can be actually sometimes overwhelming, and that there might be a way to streamline and consolidate what instruction looks like. So for all of those reasons, that is an area in particular that would benefit, I believe, from some curriculum review. Moving into our assessment system. So obviously, these things are embedded in each other. Good curriculum has assessment embedded in it so that we can see how our students are responding to that instruction. The great news is that we have some wonderful assessment practices in place here in the Reading Public Schools. In particular, at the elementary level, we have a system of benchmark and screening assessments. This year, it brought some new screening assessments into our district. And in conversations with our principals and with our curriculum leaders, they've revealed that there's a regular use of data in their decision-making. It might look a little bit different currently at different levels in different schools, but it's definitely a value that's held by our leaders. We collect a lot of different types of data about our students, including academic screenings, benchmark assessments, diagnostic assessments, and then of course we look at standardized assessments such as MCAS, SATs, AP exams, and then data sources such as grades, attendance records, and discipline records. What we've heard from our leaders is that if we were able to support a bit more of a systematic way of gathering and analyzing data, that would enhance the systems we already have in place and better enable us to meet the needs of our students. Okay. One of the other really important areas that I've looked at this year and that I've heard a lot about from our staff is about multi-tiered systems of support. And I guess I would say, probably the loudest message that I've heard from our teachers is the fact that they want to feel that they're being effective meeting the needs of all of their kids. It's just such a clear need and desire that they have stated. And especially in this pandemic context, it's really a new world for them in some ways to be able to do that. And it's just really never been more difficult and also more critical that our staff are able to do that. It means that our leaders and staff they're looking for systematic approaches to ensure that they're meeting the needs of all kids. Currently, our schools have systems in place, right? We have student study teams, and these are spots that staff can go to bring up students they're concerned about and to get supports, ideas for interventions, et cetera. Additionally, we have tutors and literacy specialists that are instrumental in providing some of those interventions. But we're hearing from our teachers that more and more students are not necessarily meeting with success with just that, with their current classroom instruction. So I think that this signals some opportunities in a few areas. When the number of students requiring intervention soars, it's a good time to look at how we're supporting teachers in that general education curriculum. And ensuring that all students are instructed with rigorous evidence-based curricular materials and instructional methods. And this is also an opportunity to relook at our early identification of students who will require additional supports and alternative teaching methods. In order to set all of this in motion, as Dr. Milichewski shared in detail earlier, leadership is an essential component of being able to do this successfully. We've heard from our building principals that they want a focus on instructional leadership. They want to be instructional leaders. They want to support their staff and advance student learning. So this includes the work that we are doing around supporting leaders, and one of the tools that we use to help our principals be instructional leaders is leveraging the educator evaluation system. That's a way that they can give specific feedback to their staff. And so that's something that we've heard from principals that they see as a valuable way to coach teachers, but would like more support in. Another area of leadership that I explored in particular was looking at what structures we have in place for curriculum leadership. The role of a curriculum leader is important in supporting our staff in ensuring we have skilled implementation of curriculum and an appropriate use of data and assessment. And while all of our levels have curriculum leadership, most of our curriculum leaders currently in district are also teachers. We have very few curriculum staff that are leaders that are dedicated just to leadership, especially at the high school level. We have heard this repeatedly from our department heads, from our building leadership, the need to have our department heads more actively involved in observing, coaching, and evaluating teachers. So I believe that's an opportunity to move learning and teaching ahead by looking at our curriculum leadership structure.
Last slide. Safe and supportive learning environment. Opportunities that we've identified and heard is one is culture. We know that, culture is trust is the hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to break, right? We realize that there is a lot of trust that, as a new administrative team that we need to build with the community and build with our staff. We've heard, certainly challenges with different issues of trust, morale, and realize that we need to continue, again, build relationships, lead with empathy, and support our staff. And I love the second one around culture is this idea of, I've heard from a lot of staff and a lot of families that if one of the best things we could do to improve culture is celebrate the great things that we're doing, right? So a teacher said to me when I was walking, if you can just celebrate the good things, it's going to help sort of shape PR in a really positive way. And I also got good feedback from a committee member too to share. There's also the opportunity for us to expand sort of our work outside of just RPS. What are ways that we connect with the larger Reading community to kind of support the culture, support our district, and I think that goes under public relations. 2, inclusive environment. We know that, we've seen an uptick sort of across the country in school districts around, issues of hate and racism. And we know that, that's, something that has also, impacted the Reading community. I've heard from staff, I've heard from students, I've heard from families looking for a strong stance and, of us saying, how are we going to stand up against issues of hate and racism? And also, how are we going to create sort of support all of our students and of our staff to be able to do this work? And also proactively, how are we going to create a sense of belonging for our students? I think the NEASC report that was released last year was a very positive report with sort of the caveat saying there's work to do to create more inclusive spaces, particularly for our students of color, right? So I think we look at our student belonging data, our YRBS data, we realize that we have work to do to create for certain demographics of students, particularly our students of color, our genderqueer students, the work that we have to do sort of in creating spaces where all students feel welcome and feel belonging. My last piece, which I think is a really interesting one, is a little bit of a flip in the sense that it's interesting that one of the strengths I've heard is that this is a community that is fiercely engaged, passionate, and very involved in education. And many of those same people shared, there's also an opportunity to sort of multiply the impact of those people in a way to improve student learning. So let me give 2 examples. One, I have heard that we don't have a systematic way to engage community partners yet to improve, teaching and learning in our schools and meet student needs outside of one-off partnerships. Someone said there has to be a better way for us to kind of wrap our arms around all the resources in the community available to us and to get the community sort of all understanding how they can support our schools. Because again, there's a community that's very eager to support. There's a community that's already supporting in a lot of ways, yet maybe it's not as systematic as it could be. The second part of that around community engagement is while there's a lot of positive communication between, families and staff, there's also the opportunity for us to expand that to look to involve things around teaching and learning, right? So how do we empower our parents to have a better understanding of what they can do at home to support their child's learning? I'll give the example of myself as a parent, right? So sometimes I don't know, like I have my third grade, my third grader, what can I do exactly at home, right, to support my child's education? It is really helpful when the child's teacher will kind of share out, who is an awesome teacher, by the way, hey, here's what we're working on. Here's some of the strategies that we're talking through. Here's some of the things I think at home that you could do to supplement what we're doing. And he also hears some of the things how your child's doing and some of the things they need to take the next step. Okay, as a parent, then I feel equipped to understand where my child is, understand where the bar is, and have some of the resources that I need to push my child forward. Now, I've heard from teachers, I've heard from families to say, if we can do that at scale, if we can also use, have our parents to leverage them as partners in their child's education, that there is a huge potential impact in improving student outcomes. This happens in a lot of places in our district, but it doesn't happen at scale, right? So I think that that's an opportunity for us to move forward. So we just shared a lot of information. We shared a lot of information, which hopefully isn't surprises to anyone. Hopefully things that people have sort of been thinking about are on their mind. Now, where do we go from here? We wanted to put this out there tonight just to help us to be transparent with what we're thinking, get feedback from the committee, get feedback from the community, share this out then in writing, and get more feedback from the community. After we get additional feedback, we then want to collaborate and get a group of what we've called a guiding coalition together to say, if this is accurate and put in anything else that we need, and there's other things that we need to do to move our district forward, let's start to put that in place for a multi-year plan, either under sort of the current structure of a district strategic plan or in crafting a new district strategic plan. That's where we're going, right? But that's still sort of months down the line. I think tonight it's enough to sit on this and open it up just to sort of questions, thoughts, concerns, feedback.
So one of the things that, you know, when we said it earlier, jumps out at me is the leadership piece. And, you know, you look at the, and something I think that this committee needs to focus on and going down the road is, you know, you look at the leaders, you've got what, eight principals, and 5 of them are me, myself, and I in the
Correct.
building. They don't have, so I think that to get them to what Sarah was saying, more the curriculum, then they got to stop being the building manager too. And we really need to have a serious discussion. It's obviously a financial discussion, a serious discussion about assistant principals at the elementary level. And that needs to be a soon type discussion.
Chuck, you're having cheering at home from principals, right? And I couldn't agree with you more, right? I couldn't agree with you more in the sense that if we really invest in leadership in the way that what we talked about earlier, that research backs up, that would be a wise investment of resource because you're then allowing the principal to be an instructional leader. I have talked with our elementary principals many times this year that we are trying to support them to be instructional leaders, but right now there's more structure sort of needed and support needed to allow them to focus fully on teaching and learning, right? This year in the pandemic has been especially challenging with sort of the staffing shortages. I think the counselor role will help. I think, like, for example, Sarah Levesque, something I was meeting with her today, something she does a wonderful job of, I think it's actually Sarah, you brought this to my attention, is she has been sort of the community connector for a lot of students and connecting them with outside resources and things that they need in the community, which is wonderful. But that takes a lot of time, and that takes away from teaching and learning, right? But that's the work that she's leading, and she's leading wonderfully, right? But now with the counselor coming in, hopefully the counselor can take over some of that work, right? But I agree with you, right, that if we are able to invest in assistant principals, that would be a huge win in enabling our principals to be strong, effective instructional leaders, and I think help to lead some of the improvements that we're seeing in these areas. So I'm glad you raised that, and I think you definitely have a lot of support internally from our leaders.
Sean?
You necessarily only spent a moment on it because there was a lot there, but and none of the themes in here surprised me. I doubt there were many surprises for any of us. But that visual of the budget piece and the per pupil expense piece puts it in pretty stark relief for me, right? Like, depending on which of these groups you look at, we are somewhere between the 6th and 40th percentile from a per pupil perspective is sort of my rough back of the napkin math. Susan could probably correct me, but somewhere in that ballpark. And, you know, there's that phrase, champagne taste on a beer budget, right? And there's this, you know, this expectation and belief that we can and should be a 90th or 95th percentile, you know, school district. I have every faith that, you know, this team is going to get to a point, or help us get to a point where we're punching well above our weight. But we have to be realistic about, you know, and I think we need to be open and honest in our conversations with the community that funding does matter. We all understand the context in which we live here in Reading with the commercial base and that sort of thing, but funding does matter. And most of the things, if not almost all of the things that you pointed to as opportunities around expanding pathways, around, you know, providing better supports and interventions, like those things require dollars because everything we do is delivered by a person for the most part, right? There's not, you know, the kids aren't widgets that like scale by writing a more efficient computer program, right? So. We have to be able to be honest about that, you know, about that set of constraints and talk about what it means and what it looks like for our, you know, medium and long-term planning for our district. Because, you know, if we continue living in this sort of place, you know, we can expect to be a really good school district. We already are. We can expect to even get a little bit better. Can we expect to get where everybody in the community sort of has in the back of their mind we need to be and should be? I don't know. I don't know that that's, you know, I don't know that that's feasible. So. You know, all those things around expanding pathways, around, you know, creating schedules that make sure kids get access to all the things that they need to do and they want to do. Like, those things require resources at the end of the day. And you guys have done a phenomenal job already this year of finding creative ways to patch holes where you can and, create some opportunities with relatively minimal budget impact. But there's going to be a ceiling on how much of that creativity, how far that creativity can go. And we just, I don't know what the forum is in which to have it. We've got one FinCom member here, so that's one starting point. But,
And an ARPA subcommittee member as well, so.
Oh, right, yeah, an ARPA subcommittee member as well. But so, I think we have to have that context and be sort of transparent about it, that it's a limiting factor, living where we do today from a budget perspective. So, that's all.
Aaron?
So it's late. I'm not gonna dwell on a particular topic or slide, but I just want to say how much I appreciate how your deep dive into the district, and I think what you have observed and learned in such a short period of time is so impressive. I mean, you really hit on everything that I think somebody or another would identify as room for improvement in the district. And it is a big list. It's a big list. And yes, there's many strengths and many wonderful things going on, but there's a lot of room to grow and improve at all levels in all areas. So I just want to remark on the fact that I'm appreciative that you've been able to recognize that so quickly, all of you. And that you're putting it all out there. You're putting it out there, you're owning it. We'll figure out, what to do in what order, but we're not trying to cover any of it up. We're not trying to ignore any of it. We're not even quite saying what's more important than something else right now. But so I appreciate everything that you included in this presentation being out there.
I think people are running out of gas.
Yeah,
I'll say
thanks.
one thing real quick, and then we'll finish up. Piggybacking off of Sean, piggybacking off of Aaron, and piggybacking off of what you said from a next steps perspective, I think that's the key right now,
Yeah.
right? Is so what, right? What's the so what here? So, in our role and advocacy from a financial perspective, we certainly have a role there. But I think one of the bigger things we need to figure out is of all those things, which ones move the needle the most? What's the highest priority, and what's the cost associated with each of those, right? So there's a ton that's in that list, and even the assistant principals that Chuck brought up wasn't technically in there.
Correct.
Right, but it's one that we've talked about, right? So I think as we look at this, and I know, Susan, you've already talked about as well, putting together like a multi-year strategy plan
Yeah.
lays it out how it would cost over years and whatnot. We need to be conscious of certain things. What's a one-time spend?
Yeah.
What's a permanent spend? And, how does that look over time? How do we layer in things like full-day kindergarten? How do we layer in the curriculum-related purchases and training that we need? We have to figure all that out, and to some degree, with some degree of precision, because it can't be a serious wild-ass guess, we have to have something that we can use to advocate on your behalf. So as we build this and work from a strategy perspective, some of that we can advocate for sooner, especially things that are maybe one-time purchases. As this ARPA committee starts getting picked up, and some of the things that we've already budgeted for next year, we potentially could say, hey, ARPA, this really fits your bill, although I know we've kind of got this, can use it for anything right now because we're, less than 10 million and the whole thing can be said any public sector service type thing that's out there. But I think we should still try to maintain to the spirit of the law to the degree. So as we work through that, what's a one time that we'd really want to put in that bucket? I think that's more of the urgent ask, right, that we really want to figure out. Is what are those one-time spends that if we spend over the next 6 to 12 months, that would go in that bucket to say, this is something we want to say, we want to spend some of that money for. Because there's going to be other people with other hands out saying, I want to spend this, right? So the sooner, as I think we started back in September, the sooner we're prepared with some of those asks, the sooner we can advocate. And as a greater committee, we're going to have to put in place a structure of how do we make those decisions? What's the return on investment for those decisions? What's one time versus, in a carry forward cost? But we have to think about that in this regard. And everything else everybody said in terms of, striving for excellence, defining excellence, but also being smart about, where are we really, as part of the conversation. It's not going to be, I will say this as well, it's not going to be just a school conversation. It's a town-wide conversation from a priorities perspective. And as we really try and put this and shape this together, it's going to be you talking to Chief Clark and Chief Burns and Fidel and everybody else and saying, okay, how can we all sharpen our pencils to achieve the greater goal for Reading? Schools are one part of it. There's a lot of people saying there's other things from a police and fire and other thing perspective as well, but how do we achieve it across the board? We're going to have to work through that as a collective group. So I thank you as well for putting this all on paper. Aaron, I think you hit it right, you know, putting things out there that the community knows, and just acknowledging it is a huge first step. Huge first step. And now it's a matter of how do we start to tackle them. So thank you. Anybody else? No? Looks like motion. Chuck, do you want to do a motion?
Oh, that's Sean.
I always
This one could be anybody.
Yeah.
This is the last one.
Motion to adjourn.
Carla says the motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. All in favor? All opposed? None. It passes. We are adjourned.